March 6, 2025. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Feldman,
Here.
Reel,
Present.
Coffee, here. Baranek,
Here.
Fioka,
Here.
McIntyre,
Here.
Herman.
Here.
Thank you. This hearing pertains to ordinance 25-064, and I'm going to ask the clerk to please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2025-064, an ordinance creating the Miller's Land Tax Increment Finance Incentive Districts, declaring improvements to parcels within each incentive district to be a public purpose and exempt for real property taxation, requiring the owners of those parcels to make service payments in lieu of taxes, establishing a municipal public improvement tax increment equivalent fund for the deposit of those services payments, authorizing school and library compensation payments, specifying the public infrastructure improvements that benefit or services parcels in the incentive district, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Mottram. So before we open it up to public comment, I wanted to understand TIF, tax increment financing. So this is to create a Miller's Landing tax increment financing incentive district. So I know there was some handouts, but I'll let Mr. Riley talk a little bit about it. If you can, just clarify it for us, its purpose, along with its definition and its public benefits. If we can do that, then I think we can move along and we'll get through the public hearing. So, and you can pivot to anybody else you'd like to who's on the dais here.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm actually trying to get the presentation that I have prepared up on the screen. If I can't get it, then I can just walk through the slides real quick just to kind of talk about what we're here for. So 3 main points that I want to go over today. Basically, what is TIFs? What is a TIF or a tax increment financing? Then how does that pertain to the Miller's Landing project? And then a quick conclusion, questions, and kick it over to our TIF council to kind of pick up on anything that I've messed up or mixed up. So it's still not loading, so I will just move into the presentation. So what is tax increment financing? Tax increment financing is essentially a method where the city can capture increased value of a parcel and then use that increased value to fund public improvements. So normally, if a property tax is increased, the increase in property value is then collected as real estate taxes and distributed to the county and various other agencies in the school. What a tax increment financing project does is it identifies a property that is before it starts a development, and then freezes the value for tax purposes at that value, and then any increase in that is then paid, the difference of the taxes are then paid to the city as opposed to distributed to the county. And I see my presentation is up on the screen.
I got you.
So.
Drew, I got it up for you.
Oh, you got it? Well, you have the the not pretty version. I actually went and printed it up for everybody. Okay, so for example, let's say that there is a vacant property that's valued at $100. The city identifies it as a TIF property, and then a massive development goes in, and the property is now valued at $1,000. Assuming that there's a tax rate of 10%, the pre-TIF taxes would be $10. So the post-development tax payments would be $100. So in this instance, if a tax increment finance is passed on this property, the county would still be receiving the $10, but the difference of that $90 would go to the city as opposed to the county. Next slide, please, Zach. So TIFs can be chosen for different percentages and for different time periods. We can also carve out the proceeds that should have gone to a school district and keep them to be funded at those same levels regardless of the TIF. Those are known as non-school TIFs. And that I also want to be very clear here because I've seen some information circulating out there. Property owners are still paying the same amount as what they would be paying without the TIF. It's just the allocation, the disbursement of the funds shift based on if there is a TIF out there. Next slide. So what does that mean for Miller's Landing? So Ordinance 2025-64 authorizes the creation of a 30-year, 100% non-school TIF, which means we are keeping the Stow Monroe Falls School District, and as an additional thing, we are keeping the Stow Monroe Falls Library whole. And because of the type of TIF it is, it's an incentive district TIF. And this one allows us to do 2 phases, which is found on the next slide. And the reason for that, you can see, they actually capture the different phases of Miller's Landing. And the reason we do that is the year you pass the TIF is normally when the value is captured. On an incentive district TIF, if you know that there's going to be multiple phases, you can create different phases for the TIF. That way, if phase 2 isn't constructed this year, they're constructed next year, we're not losing a year's worth of increased value to the TIF. So that's why you'll see 2 phases in this ordinance compared to other TIFs that we've done in the past. Next slide. And then why are we doing this? If council remembers that there were a lot of concerns from residents about stormwater issues, road construction, repair, sidewalks, traffic, I threw on their public parks and spaces. These are all things that can be funded through the TIF. So without a TIF, the city would have to be dealing with these issues anyway. This is just a method that we can capture some of that development fund, that investment, and put it into a fund that can only be used for proceeds for projects that directly benefit those parcels. I also want to note that you can, but you do not have to, incur debt against TIFs. That can be a structure to then use the TIF proceeds to pay back debt service, but we do not have to do that. The city could also wait and build up stockpile in the TIF fund and then pay outright as well. Just depends on when the project's needed and how much money is developed from the TIF. So in summary, the city can utilize TIFs as another tool in the toolbox to help fund public improvements. It just gives us another way, another mechanism we can use to solve past, present, and future problems. I also have circulated to council a 1-page front and back fact sheet. I have extra copies if you need that. That kind of gives a timeline of what the TIF, like what a TIF, how it would be developed, and then also a frequently asked questions that we've seen that have popped up regarding TIFs. For members of the public, there is a stack of those back at the back of the room if anybody wants them. Otherwise, you can also see me after the meeting, and I can get your contact information and email it to you as well. So that ends my presentation. I want to kick it over real quick to Russ Balthus from Squire Patton Boggs, who is our TIF counsel, to kind of iron out a little bit more of what the Miller's Landing TIF is going to look like, and also timeline of when this TIF is going to be passed and that sort of thing. So, Russ.
Thank you, Law Director Riley. One thing, I think you did a very nice job of covering TIFs in general. One thing I would add is the director noted, a lot of communities will issue debt and then use the TIF payments to pay back that debt because they want to put the infrastructure in sooner. You do not have to do that. As the director pointed out, you can also let the money build up and pay as you go. But a third option is if it's an expense that the city wants to make anyways, you could pay it at that time and then reimburse yourself with the TIF proceeds as they come in over time. So there's a lot of different flexibilities in how you want to use those funds. There are a number of different types of TIFs. Most of what was discussed applies to all of them, but a few things I wanted to talk about is how this TIF that you're considering is a little bit different than normal TIFs, and particularly incentive district TIFs. With incentive district TIFs, the reason they're normally used is when you build owner-occupied housing, and I'm going to call it a normal TIF, but a public TIF under 570940 of the revised code would not work with owner-occupied housing unless certain other conditions are met, which are not the case in this TIF. So what you do is you do what's called an incentive district TIF. That changes a few things. That's why we have to have the 2 districts. They can't be more than 300 acres. And it also requires this public hearing that you're holding today. The main purpose of this public hearing is the revised code gives people whose property is in this incentive district the right to receive 30 days notice of this hearing if their property extends beyond an overlay that legally they describe how to put on the map, they have the right to opt out of the incentive district if they choose. As Director Riley pointed out, it does not change how much a property owner pays in taxes. I've been doing this for quite a few years. I've yet to see an individual opt out, but they have that right. And so it's something that's important to have this public hearing. Another thing I would note is normally with a TIF, you can just pass your normal legislative process. With an incentive district TIF, you have to do the 30 days notice for this hearing, and council is not permitted by law to consider this ordinance until 30 days after this hearing. So I believe April 10th is the date that you're scheduled for consideration of this ordinance. If council chooses to adopt the ordinance, within 15 days, you'll send a copy of it to the Ohio Department of Development. That's just kind of record keeping because they like to keep track of how these tools are being used to make investments and development across the state. So that's that. And then the next thing you'll need to do, which your administration would take care of for you, is file what's called a DTE 24. It's a tax form. It gets filed with the county auditor, fiscal officer in our case, and then they will then send it to the Ohio Department of Taxation. They will look at your legislation. They can take them up to a year, and then they'll issue what's called a final determination letter saying that you did everything properly. They'll exempt the property taxes, require the property owners to make those payments, and then they'll send that letter back to the county. So then the county will collect those taxes as they would normally collect. As this TIF is set up, they're going to pay the schools as if the TIF doesn't even exist. So the schools, and any kind of TIF, the schools wouldn't lose money they're currently getting because that base value is frozen and they're getting it. But in this case, even that increased value, the schools will still receive that as well. So it holds the schools harmless. That's why as the director pointed out, it's called a non-school TIF. So they will do that, and then you guys added on the library, so the library will be treated the same way. The rest of those funds will then be directed by the fiscal officer to the city. The ordinance that you'll consider also creates what's called a tax increment equivalency fund, and then that's where the money has to go. And then that money is held in that fund, and then that's where you're able to use those dollars to do the public infrastructure improvements you're discussing. You'll notice that there's an economic development plan that talks a little bit about what improvements are going to be made. If things change, if 5 years from now there's different needs that the council would like to address, you can always amend it and add those changes. The only rule that you need to follow by the Ohio Revised Code is there is an obligation that we're able to show that those improvements benefit the parcels that are TIF'd. It doesn't have to be on the parcels. It doesn't have to be adjacent to the parcels. It just has to benefit the parcel. So, and that's a fact determination that you usually work with the auditors. Trying to make sure if there's anything else. One thing about this type of TIF that's also a bit different, this incentive district TIF, is it also requires notice to the county. That's not something that you're normally required to do. Notice was required to the county. You have to do 45 business day notice before you can consider it. That notice has already been sent out. The county has to object within 30 days. I'd want to check the calendar again, but I think their window may have closed, so I don't think the county can object at this point. So you don't have to worry about revenue sharing with the county. But that is a right that the county could have exercised under the revised code. So now I have a short quiz for all of you I'd like to pass out. No, I'm kidding. But happy to answer any questions that any of you may have. It's a pretty technical area, particularly incentive district TIFs. But the general concepts, I think you've all become pretty familiar with as you've worked through TIFs in the past. But the incentive districts are a little bit different. I just wanted to make sure we could point out some of those differences so you were familiar and understood like why we have to do it now and you aren't necessarily doing it with a different TIF. So again, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bowles. We'll open to the floor to council in just one moment. So I appreciate that explanation. Mr. Riley, I appreciate the explanation, and I want to thank Mr. Reel for getting this together. We're keeping track of the timeline, correct? I heard Mr. Baltus talk about 30 days here, 45 days here. We're keeping track of all that, right?
Yep, and I believe we've sent a copy of that timeline to council as well previously.
Okay, great.
I can resend it if we need to, but yeah, so I believe this is on for second reading tonight. I would ask after its second reading if we could table it until the April 10th meeting so that we meet all those 30-day deadlines. That's the last one we have to. So I would just ask that when we're in council tonight if we table it until the April 10th meeting.
Well, thank you, Mr. Riley. Let me, before I open the floor to council, I like section 2 because we've had some discussion on what are the dollars going to be used for. And section 2, public infrastructure improvements. roadway improvements, water system improvements, sanitary sewer improvements, storm drainage improvements, pedestrian sidewalks and bike paths, street lights, gas facilities, electrical facilities, parks and recreation facilities located within 1 mile of any incentive district. So I just wanted to make sure, I know we've had some discussion on where these dollars going to be used, and I believe, Mr. Riley, it's a separate fund, right? So it all goes back. Good. All right, let me, I appreciate those explanations. Thank you. Let me open the floor to any council members that have a question or questions. Mrs. Coffey.
Just have a question regarding the parameters for the distance for the area that benefits the properties. This says 1 mile. Is there a distance or is it subjective?
Dramatically last time. Great, it's impressive. There is not a hard written code. The revised code requires that they benefit the parcel. There's no statutory answer to that question. What we have are years of examples of auditors pushing and cities pushing back and having discussions. Usually the standard you would look at is, let's say you're going to have a traffic light that's right to come into the allotment. That would clearly be permitted. If you have a light that's on the complete other side of town, normally that would not be permitted. Where it gets a little different, you might have a traffic light that's 5 miles away, but if there's a major highway right there and that's the main way that 90% of the people that live in that community come, and that community added to the traffic needs of that corner, you could make an argument, and the auditors have accepted arguments that a traffic light, though 10 miles away, might be permitted if you could show that it benefits those parcels. So it's a subjective test that's usually worked through with auditors. And if you have something that is in the gray area, like my advice would normally be to just reach out to the auditor and say, here's kind of what we're thinking. What is your reaction? And you're either going to go to, yeah, we think that's fine, or answer these 3 questions and we'll let you know. So I don't know if that helps with your answer.
That helps. Thank you. One other question. Is it a common municipality practice, including the schools and the library and the increase? I know that obviously every municipality is probably different, and we definitely want our schools and library to be in a good place, but is that a common practice to, obviously they're included in the initial, but in the increased value?
I would say it varies quite a bit. Something to think about. I will first say the library is not that common. So that's a little bit unique that you guys protect your library. That is not common. Other communities do it, but not a lot. The school district, if we were to do a TIF where we took a portion of the school district's money, if it was longer than 10 years or more than 75%, the school district has a right that they have to consent. So they could object to the period over 10 years or over 75%. So what's most common is if you're going to do a project like that, the school district and the city negotiate what's called a school compensation agreement or a revenue sharing agreement, where they then agree to give the school district 50% of what they would have otherwise received if the project hadn't been exempted. So usually the reason school districts will agree to things like that, a lot of times, 1, they want to help the city with infrastructure, or 2, there are some projects that may not happen but for a TIF. And I've heard superintendents say, I'd rather get 50% of something than 100% of nothing. So then we'll negotiate on things like that. Does that answer your question?
Makes sense. Yes. Thank you.
Other members from council? Questions? Comments? Okay, seeing none, we will move along. Thank you for that information, Ms. Valdes. Thank you, Mr. Riley. Moving on in the agenda, now comes the time where we ask for comments from the audience. It is a public comment period on the TIF only. So should you wish to make any comments, please raise your hand. You'll be recognized. You'll have 3 minutes to make your comments, and it'll become part of the permanent record. Anyone in the audience who wish to address council administration about the TIF? Thank you. Seeing none, we'll move on. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn. Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
notary, I believe.
Call to order the Stow City Council Planning Committee meeting for March 6, 2025. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Herman,
Here.
Fioka,
Here.
Feldman,
Here.
Baranek.
Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from?
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
The minutes from February 20th are approved.
Thank you, Mr. Herman. Quick update on Dick's Sporting Goods. After the last council meeting, I sent an email that they're planning on opening March 15th. That's already been pushed back a little bit, so disregard. I think they're looking towards the end of March now, from the last I heard. As soon as I get a definite date, I'll let all council members know so they can come out to the ribbon cutting. Planning Commission next week. There'll be a site plan for Suncrest Gardens, which will be south of Scarlet Lane. And then AMF Bruins on Campus Drive. They were awarded a CRA agreement a couple months ago, so they're coming through the site plan. I expect council to see those at the next meeting. For the zoning code update, so we've reviewed the first 3 chapters. We have the base districts, overlay districts, and use standards. We expect those to be published on the project website tomorrow or early next week. I'll make sure council is notified of that. When you get those, review them. It's going to be a big document, but please go through them. Let us know if anything jumps out at you. If you have any questions on anything, we'll be happy to schedule a meeting or just get on a phone call and go through those together. We intend to have the steering committee meeting for those chapters March 19th is what we're aiming for. Again, for those of you that are on the steering committee, I'll send an email either tomorrow or early next week. Other than that, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cowan. Any
Thank you.
questions for our planning director, Mr. Feldman?
Thank you, Mr. Herman. Real quick, Mr. Cowan, they have Stow colors when I drive down Commerce. Can you give me a little bit of information on Akron Stow Metal Recycling? Is that right? I mean, it's new.
Yeah.
And before you do that, I want to thank Sarah for her list. A lot of people ask, so I appreciate the list you emailed out so we know what's going on. But if you can give me a little background on that, and I won't interrupt you again. The Wayback Burgers, too, I got something on that. There's a Wayback Burger coming to town, so
Yeah.
if you can give me some information so I can forward on to residents, that'd be great.
Yeah, that was a list of businesses which should be in the State of the City report. Akron Metal Recycling, that's on Commerce Drive, the scrap metal recycling facility. So they came in, I think they got through their permits a few months ago. So I don't know what their status is on operation or not. I think they're, working right now. But yeah, it's just a scrap metal recycling facility. And then Wayback Burgers? Yeah, we got a permit, I think, for signs right now. I don't think they intend to open until June, so they don't have their certificate of occupancy yet. But we are expecting that to come through at the Fish Creek Plaza.
Any other questions for our planning director?
Wayback was my question.
Okay. So before we move on to our business item for the evening, just to set expectations, good to see a lot of people here tonight. The planning director is going to give a presentation about the site plan, and then the council will discuss and ask questions of the director. Then we will invite the applicant and their representatives to give further context and answer questions from council. And then council will discuss and move to add this item to our agenda for tonight's city council meeting, which will start after 7. But then everyone who wishes to speak will get a chance to speak before this committee meeting ends. You will have up to 3 minutes to speak. We just ask that you come give your name and address, and we'll swear you in. And then we won't be voting on this until the full council meeting later tonight. We just want to make sure everyone understands that you'll have a chance to get heard. Thank you. Mr. Cowan.
Thank you. So real quick, just want to touch base on the art development process and the timeline. So this first went to Planning Commission February 11th. It was tabled. They requested some more information. And then February 25th, Planning Commission reviewed again. They did recommend denial of the project. So that brings us to today, March 6th, at Planning Committee. Planning Committee, as Mr. Herman stated, they'll take public comment. They could choose to move it to the City Council tonight, and then City Council would have the final say on the approval or denial. All right, so this project is for Sheets, corner of Fish Creek and Stow on the west corner. This property is 4.68 acres and zone C3. So we're here for conditional use, site plan, and variances. So current conditions, vacant. There is the exception of the south property. These are two separate parcels, so if approved, they would be combining these. There's I think, a single family home on this, which would be demolished. The access drive, which you'll see on the site plan, will extend into the karate studio property where they have an access agreement. So the access for the site would be from this driveway serving Sheets. There would also be a second access on Fish Creek. So the building would be about 6,100 square feet. Property would contain 40 parking spaces. The two conditional uses are for a gas station and drive-through facility. The comprehensive plan designates this as retail service, which is the general designation for a commercial in the comprehensive plan, but it is also in the focus area J, which outlines some more recommendations for the area. So kind of summarizing this, Section A recommends limiting the potential for future retail in the area, recommends downzoning parcels, meaning making them a less intensive zoning district. It does say that if expansion of existing businesses occur, that should be based on improved landscaping, screening, and building design improvements that would upgrade the appearance of the area. Section B recommends to encourage infill residential development around the area. C is to allow senior care facilities as a transition, which is already conditionally allowed in this area. And D and E is to install sidewalks, which this project will, and to improve traffic improvements, which it would. This is the original site plan that was reviewed on February 11th. Between the 11th and 25th, they submitted a slightly revised plan to address comments about wetland preservation. So this is the original one. The only thing that really changes is the back of the property here. They're just decreasing this landscaped island to increase this wetland area in the back. So this is the revised plan. This is what Planning Commission made a recommendation on. So this is what's being reviewed. Building setbacks, parking setbacks, they comply with all those. The building itself will be 110 feet from Fish Creek, 225 feet from Stow Road. Parking setbacks will be at least 20 feet, meeting all code requirements. And then again, just pointing out that difference. Sorry, that'll be on the next slide. But the intent for that revision was, again, to preserve more wetland. So doing so, reduce that landscaped island, that would preserve an additional 2,700 square feet of wetland area, which is indicated in the blue. The red wetland is what would be mitigated. Doing so does create another variance that they did not need originally. They would need a variance to not meet that minimum 5% of interior parking lot landscaping. So under this plan, they are providing 2.46% of interior landscaping in the parking area. And again, just showing what was revised. The same number of trees would still be provided. They'd be just moving one tree up on the other side of the access point. But other than that, that's the only revision that was submitted. Landscaping, so about 70% of the lot area will remain landscaped. Our code only requires 25%. 11 shade trees will be installed within the parking area and around the parking lot perimeter. We mentioned the parking lot screening, and then the screening required along the west property line abutting the residential district. That requirement would be met. They would be keeping a significant portion of existing trees between, which would be between the drive-through aisle and again that west property line. Those would all remain. I think there will also be a fence installed between that area. And this plan was approved by the city arborist. Photometric, this is the lighting for the property. This does require a variance. They would have 16 shielded light poles around the property at 23 feet in height. The one variance they would need is you can have a maximum of 1/2 foot candle at the property line. This would be exceeded at the access drives, which we're seeing is pretty common for developments now. So this would be exceeded at the access drives, in these approximate locations, up to about 3.1 foot candles, which is a typical parking lot lighting level. Elevations, typical sheets building design consisting of brick, stone veneer, black or dark bronze and red accents on the building. Elevations for the gas canopy. This one does require 2 variances. One is to exceed the permitted height of 17 feet. This is proposed at the very top to be 22.5 feet. And then our code also prohibits these to be backlit, so they can't be internally illuminated. They're proposing for this one to be illuminated. They did submit a traffic impact study, and they will be making improvements to this area that would require a deceleration lane southbound on Fish Creek Road, a deceleration lane westbound on Stow. There will also be a right turn lane on Stow Road, and improvements to the signal timing at the intersection. These improvements would be covered at the cost of the developer. And these are the supplemental regulations for gas stations and drive-through facilities. I won't go into this into too much detail. I'll come back to it if you have any questions, but a lot of these regulations are about setbacks for gas pumps and the fuel canopy, loudspeaker systems. They've shown to be in compliance with these regulations. And then this is my last slide. We got a lot of questions about the underground detention. This was part of some more information that they submitted. Stormwater will be underground detention on the site, which will be closer to Fish Creek Road in the parking lot. The stormwater will discharge at the east corner into the existing system that runs under Fish Creek Road. Storage volume and discharge rate that meets the Mudbrook Watershed District requirements. And this is all designed to accommodate the 100-year storm per code requirements. So I'll leave this up for review. Again, this is a review of 2 conditional uses and 4 variances, one for the gas canopy height, one to allow a backlit gas canopy, one to exceed the maximum lighting levels, and the last one, which was added, is to not provide the minimum 5% interior parking lot landscaping. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions from council? Mr. McIntyre?
Thank you, Mr. Collin. What was, obviously Planning Commission recommended denial. What was their reason for their denial? What conditions did they indicate weren't met as the basis of their denial?
At the meeting, Planning Commission did not give a formal statement of why they recommended denial. From their discussions from the previous meeting, they seemed concerned about traffic and the number of gas stations at the intersection.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Feldman?
Thank you, Mr. Herman. Real quick, Mr. Cowan, can you go to the Circle K entrance exit? Is it exactly the same as what the site plan is for the sheets? That's
Yeah,
So
so
they're offset a little,
it would be
there's-
slightly offset.
but they're still kind of across from each other, right?
Yes.
All right, and then and maybe it's in the documentation, I haven't seen it. Is there anything about burying or submersible gasoline in a wetland? Is there anything about that that is in the report, or I'm just giving you stuff that residents
Mhm.
gave to me, right?
Yeah.
So I have to give answers.
Nothing in the zoning code. It's important to note this is also outside the Mudbrook wetland setback overlay. So normally these are category 2 wetlands. We'd have setback requirements for those, but this is outside the overlay. Other than that, in the zoning code, there's nothing that I'm aware of.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Herman.
Mr. McIntyre.
Mr. Cowan, I think in here the code says, entrance driveways or ingress egress need to be at least a minimum of 100 feet from an intersection.
Yeah.
Our code. Where do we designate that 100 foot from? Is it the center of the intersection, or where does that 100 foot measurement come from?
It's subjective. I would say it would be measured probably to the edge of the intersection, which these were approximately 120 feet from the intersection.
So you're saying from approximately the stop bar there in the southbound direction?
Yeah.
So if it was from the center of the intersection, it would probably be greater than 100 feet.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions from council before we hear from the applicant? Seeing none, we invite the applicant or the representatives to come to the podium and add additional context and be available for questions. And please state your name and address.
Thank you very much. My name is Diane Calta. I'm here today as a representative with Sheets and Land Development Council with Mansard Gavin. My address is 1001 Lakeside Avenue, Cleveland, Ohio. And I'd like to introduce my team, which is the Sheets team. We have with us today, I'll just go in order of where everyone's sitting. Owen Wolf is our site selector with Sheets. We have Ryan Balco, who is our regional entitlement manager. We have Ellen Selly, who is our entitlement manager. We have Adam Berenger, who is with HZW Engineering, and he is our environmental wetlands ecologist. He said, just call him an expert, based upon his license plate. I think he's all in. I think it says hydraulic. If I read it, there you go. And our finally, I have Kevin Westbrooks. He is with GPD. He is our traffic engineer. So I wanted to start just with a general high-level overview and then let the team take over from there. I probably have about 5-10 minutes-ish. We'll see how it goes. We just want to make sure, I know you guys are rolling to another committee and to council and things like that. So I did time this, but it will take a little bit just to go over. First, I'd like to thank your planning department, engineering department. We have been working closely with them for some time to come up with this plan. And as you know, we've continued to revise it based upon comments and feedback and so forth, which is where we came up with the revised plan to try and move and allow some additional wetland to remain. So we thank them for that, and we've come a long way. And a lot of what I typically put in my presentation, I said this before at the Planning Commission, you took my thunder, Zach, because it's in your planning report. You guys are off the charts on everything that you put in your planning report. I don't know if council's familiar with that, but there are very few communities that have such a comprehensive report. So for me, I would just be, regurgitating what's in there. It's all in there. You've outlined everything that is required of your code, what we meet, outline the variances. Ellen will touch a little bit on those variances, but I just wanted to introduce the team, let you know that I wanted to do a general overview on the legal and zoning code perspective, turn it over to the experts. As you know, we're looking at a site plan, conditional use, and variance approval. This is in a C3 community retail district. So I always like to start with, what is that? We kind of all know, right? But it is established to permit, and I just take this right from your code, to permit small to medium-sized retail centers at major intersections in order to consolidate commercial use in these locations and prohibit sprawl along major streets. So your code considers this area a major intersection. What we have proposed, it's a large site. It's it will be, as consolidated, will become 4.6 acres, which is a fair amount of land. I like to say that it's about 2 acres, which we'll be using. But then when you break that down further and you look at the square footage of our store, and you look at the square footage of the canopy, for example, which would encompass the fuel islands, you're about 10,000 square feet. 10,000 square feet is about a quarter of an acre. So just to give you the idea of the lay of the land there. And as Mr. McIntyre pointed out, those access points do meet your code, and they do exceed that requirement. And they may not match up with the establishment across the way on Stow Road. However, they do meet the code. It's quite possible those other 2 locations don't meet your code, but they're probably grandfathered. There's been some discussion about your comprehensive plan, so we spent some time with that and talked about it with our team. Your comprehensive plan is dated from 2017. I think it was approved in 18. Those things take time to do. There's a lot of data that's collected. And this isn't a negative, it's just to give a perspective. Some of the information in there is probably a little bit dated for this area. It goes back to data from 2015. So if you're looking back at traffic information from 2015, things have changed out there. And I think it's a busier intersection than the comprehensive plan found back in that. Nonetheless, it's a major intersection. Your comprehensive plan hasn't been, what I'd say, adopted into your code. It's considered standards or guidelines. So Zach did a great job going over those. And I just wanted to highlight a couple things. You know, it talks about sidewalks. It talks about improvements to the intersection, both of which we're doing. And the improvements to the intersection, I'm sure you're all familiar with. These are significant improvements to the intersection. And when I say improvements, it's infrastructure that's going to be put in to allow some additional maneuverability and efficiency in that intersection. However, we can't solve that intersection with those improvements. But it is, I think, the way I described it for the team was, we're teeing this up for the city. And we think that you can and are looking at some other potential plans for that area. And if it wasn't clear from the plan, this site has been situated so that if there are any improvements that this city would like to do at some future time, there's no need for additional right-of-way acquisition by the city. So we've positioned this in a way, thinking forward, not knowing what you're going to do. Don't have a crystal ball. I wish I did. It would make life a lot easier. But if you do, there should be more than enough room for the city to make any additional improvements without the need of any right-of-way acquisition. And when you do that, if you situate the building in such a way that it's supposed to be 20 feet from the right-of-way, and then all of a sudden you need more right-of-way, then instantly it doesn't meet your code. So we've thought through all of that. You know, the comprehensive plan talks about down zoning. That we're not here to comment on that. What I can say is, based upon that plan, this has been zoned commercial since the 70s. So this is a commercial use. We're not looking to expand. This is a piece of property that's zoned commercial. We're not looking to say, add on this piece and rezone it and make it commercial. We're staying within the confines of what's already been zoned commercial. The site plan, as you know, but for the few variances, meets all of the city's code. And all of that's been detailed in the planner's staff report, parking, building setbacks, etc. We will go through, our team, the functioning of the sites, the traffic study, the wetlands, the stormwater drainage, and the site selection criteria. There's been some questions about there being 2 other gas stations on this intersection, and Owen will address the site selection. But of course, I was noodling around, and there's something called, there's white papers written on this. I don't know if any of you have had experience with it. I didn't go to business school, I just went to law school. But it's called game theory. And everybody wants to be in the same place. And that's how gasoline stations operate. It's all about traffic counts, right? And there's more to it. I'm simplifying it. But the idea is that gas stations, 75%, and you'll hear from the traffic engineer, 75% of gasoline stations, their traffic is drive-by. So I gave the example, and it was, I don't know if you'll laugh at this or not, but the idea is if you need gas and you're on your way to work, you're going to stop at the gas station along the way to work. So you didn't make a stop just to go to the gas station and go home. Now, if my husband would want to fill up my gas tank every Sunday night, and he took my car keys and took my car and he went to the gas station and he filled it up every Sunday for me, that would be a dedicated trip to the gas station. That never happens in my house, and I would say for most people it doesn't either. But the concept is you don't just make the trip to the gas station. You do it along the way, which means 75% of the traffic is existing traffic. It's not added traffic. So we always like to point that out because I think it is significant, and it addresses why everybody likes to be in the same place. The other thing is you're probably going to have the cheapest gas in town. Competition is obviously fostered when you have gas stations clustered like this. As far as the variances, sake of comparison, for what it's worth, and Drew, you can cringe, but these are the same variances or similar variances that were granted for the Kent Road facility. But they very much are in keeping with our operations. The canopy height, our team, believe it or not, went out and measured the other canopies that you have at the intersection, so they can comment on that. But again, this is a typical height that you'll find for canopies, and it is angled. So I always like to say, we're not granting a variance. If you think about what would probably be the midpoint of the highest point, the midpoint of everything in the middle, because it's angled, I think Ryan said it's about 21 feet. The truss is about 15.5, so it gives you an idea on that variance. The foot candles, last time, or when we were in front of the Planning Commission, we had some dialogue about the foot candles. With the foot candle, apparently a foot candle is equal to a lumen, and 100 lumens is a flashlight. So at these access points, I think we're at 3.1 foot candles. Your code is half a candle. And again, along the property line for the residential, it's at 0. These are just the access points where they exceed that half candle. The lighting on the canopy, Ellen can address that. When we revised the site plan, as I mentioned, we tried to draw it away to not impact as many wetlands, but our wetlands expert will address what all of that means. I submitted a letter to the Planning Commission, which should be part of the record, and in that I went through all of your variance factors and conditions, and for the sake of, I think, some efficiency tonight, I won't repeat those, but I'll just ask that they be reflected in the record. They're on page 3 of the letter dated December 27th of 2024. Now, the conditional uses, we know the store is permitted. We've got conditional uses for the drive-through and the gas pumps. The decision on the granting of the conditional uses should be based on what I always say is evidence, not opinions. So not, I like this, or you like that, or not in my backyard, or this might happen, or this could happen. Again, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know. We have to base it upon all of our experts and their reports and their documents. And Sheets has been doing this for quite a long time. I think I mentioned at the Planning Commission, there's about 700 stores. They have a lot of data and data points and analytics to use that they bring when they're designing this site. I was at a car wash the other day, and the drive aisle was not big enough. And I said to myself, if I was at Sheets, this would not be an issue. The drive aisles are intentionally, we'll say, oversized so that you can maneuver the site, and that's done intentionally. That's for everyone's benefit. That's for Sheets. That's for somebody walking into the store. That's for somebody getting gas. It's for the efficient and safe operation overall. Um, I can go through some examples of the conditional use standards. First, you have requirements, which we've met all of those: distance requirements, location, things like that. And then you have in your code applicable what you would call standards. So things like adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, and or necessary facilities have been or are being provided. So this property has all of its utilities, it has access to Fish Creek and Stow, and we've detailed acceptable stormwater drainage facilities that have been reviewed. They'll continue, the plan as it gets developed will continue to be reviewed by the city, but the concept is we've met the general requirements so far for all of the stormwater drainage infrastructure. And Alan can speak to those and where they are on site. I think there was some confusion as to whether at the Planning Commission there was sort of this detention area where there would be water detained, or it's all underground. So if there's any question about that, Alan can show where that happens on the site. And even though it's shown on the site, it's underground. So it's an area where there will be cars driving over it. And the engineer maybe can jump in and explain the details of it, but I'll leave that to the experts. Another example is the establishment, maintenance, and operation of the conditional use will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, or general welfare. This is a multi-million-dollar investment. It's going to increase the value of the property. Kind of going to your TIF conversation, there will be significant real estate taxes that are generated from this investment. There will be income taxes generated from the new jobs. You're also going to have this capital improvement that Sheets is taking on. It's not something that the city is paying for. And you have similar establishments at this corner that are not to anyone's detriment. So in closing, we are asking that this committee move this forward to council so that they can further, that all of you as a council can hopefully approve this evening. But we are here to answer any questions. We'll continue our presentation. Again, obviously answer any questions. And if by chance there's a need to provide any more information or anything that comes up, we can certainly do that as well. So Owen is going to be speaking next about the site.
Thank you, Owen. Please state your name and address.
Sure. Owen Wolf, 243 Sheets Way, Claysburg, Pennsylvania, 16625. Thank you, Diane. Zach, if you could pull up the PowerPoint presentation that we shared. One of the things that we've noticed from the Planning Commission meetings and some of the resident comments was that there is some concern about multiple gas stations, especially 3 gas stations at a shared intersection, and or the type of location that this is in reference to other locations that we have that are more focused on interstates or major state highways. So I wanted to provide a couple of examples, most of which on the screen on this first slide are actually within Northeast Ohio. And then further throughout the presentation, we'll look at some other locations. But here you can see pretty quickly Youngstown, Seven Hills, Middleburg, and North Olmsted. And then Raleigh I picked specifically because that actually has one of our existing stores. But here are a handful of pretty quickly generated examples of where there are 3 fuel users at intersections. As Diane kind of commented to, it's not uncommon for us as we're going about our identification to find other locations that there are already fuel users there. There's a reason that there's fuel users or restaurants or quick service food restaurants at those locations, and it's because that's where the demographic is served best. That's where the traffic counts exist in order to make the investment a sufficient venture on the individual's responsibility to put the location there, as well as just the overall zoning. You know, that's something that we really focus on from a high level. If we see a piece of, actually, one of the first things I do when I look at a municipality is I focus on the zoning code and where is the commercial-oriented major thoroughfares. I think a lot of you guys being residents of Stow understand that the intersection of Fish Creek and Stow is a major thoroughfare that matches the C3 zoning code. Obviously, there are similar uses at that intersection, both in the C3 as well as in a less intensive zoning district of the C2 with the Marathon on the north portion of the intersection. So Zach, if you can go to the next slide. So there was also a comment about the type of location as I referenced that hay sheets are only found off highways or at major interstates. So I think we have anywhere from 10 to 15 examples here pretty quickly of our locations that are not oriented at major state route intersections or immediately off of highways or interstates. I've mentioned this before to the Planning Commission, and I'll reiterate myself. This is what our company was born on. I'm actually from Altoona, Pennsylvania, where Sheetz is headquartered and began. Altoona is a community of 40,000 people, and I think we have 15 Sheetz stores there, not even exaggerating. They're neighborhood convenience stores. It's a place to be an amenity to the neighbors. I have lived in homes that are close to Sheetz before. I personally believe that they are a great operator, which is why I wanted to continue the involvement with the company. But here you have multiple examples on this first page where, again, these are not highway or state route oriented. You can see the proximity to residential, which is also something that is not uncommon for us by any means. Again, being that we are a convenience amenity to those given neighborhoods. So Zach, if you can flip to the next one. Here's just some more examples. I'm happy to answer any site-specific questions. I can appreciate that the specific sites probably don't mean a lot to you guys, being that some of these are in different states across our footprint. But you can flip to the next one too. There are a plethora of examples of locations that match the criteria of this Fish Creek Stow Road intersection. So while I can appreciate that there may be inquisition to the quality of the location, or is it too small? Is it too interior? Is it too close to residential? Is there even enough traffic to support your guys' investment? As Diane commented, our company's been around a little over 70 years. We have almost 800 stores now. And this is really our traditional type of location. This is what our backbone is. This is where we found over those 70 years that we can be a great partner with the community. As you guys are already aware of, we're appreciative of the relationship that we have with our existing facility, as well as hopefully 2 more across various arteries within the city. So I'm happy to answer any additional questions on the specific site. I know I had mentioned a lot in our previous meetings as to why we chose this location. But if you guys have any specific questions back to the subject location or any of the examples that I've prepared and referenced, I'm happy to address any of those either now or later.
Any questions for now before we proceed with the presentation? Okay, we can continue with the presentation. Thanks.
Thanks. So I'll pass the baton to Ellen and she'll get into the technical components.
Hi, I'm Ellen Selly. I'm with Sheetz 351 Sheetz Way, Altoona, Pennsylvania. Can we move to the next slide, Zach? Thanks. So this is just the overall site. We had an ALTA survey done. You can see the different topography and how large the site is, the 2 properties that we've all kind of talked about, and then the Karate Center just next to us. And then here is the proposed site plan. In red around the property, around the right-of-way there, that is our new dedicated right-of-way that Diane alluded to. When this project would go through and whenever we would consolidate the properties, that's when this new right-of-way line would take effect, and it would be right-of-way that would be dedicated to the city. Can you go back? Sorry, I'm going to keep talking about the site. Some other things on the site to point out. We obviously have our fuel canopy placed in an intentional location. That's with everything on our site. Everything is very intentional. Dan talked about how wide our drive aisles are. Our canopy is nearest the intersection, as close as possible. All of our, the busiest part of our site is going to be that canopy. It is furthest away from the residential. Another reason why it's there. Some other things near the back of the site, closer to the residential, that's our more quiet area, which is our drive-through. Some other QSR users, the drive-through might not be their quiet area, but for us it is. During our peak hour for our drive-through, it's around lunchtime, and it's maybe 10 cars an hour. We're not a Dunkin', we're not a Starbucks, we're not a Chick-fil-A. It's just an added amenity to our users. We did reduce that island there to kind of gain some more space for the wetland. And then also that you can see a fence that we put in kind of like that L shape around the site as well. And that would be a board-on-board fence to kind of create that separation between the wetland and then our, development. Other things on site are, so, that's the drive-through stacking, but then obviously you'll have the pickup window that's on Page South here. We have 40 parking stalls. Some are around the building, some are along Fish Creek. And then our two driveway entrances are also intentional. They're placed as far away from the intersection as possible. And we were able to, right when this project started, to get an agreement with the karate person to make sure we already have that in place for that cross access, for our lighting, for all the construction that we have to do over there. All of that easement is already in place, and it was very intentional to make sure that driveway was pushed as far away from the intersection as possible. Go ahead then. Thank you. This is just the grading plan. I wanted you guys to be able to see part of reducing that landscape island. We also, the grades along our property, we tightened those up. So before it was a more gradual grade down to the wetland, we have made that a little steeper just to gain whatever we could back to the wetland. However we could gain a few more square feet on the wetland, we did. And so that's what you see on this grading plan. And then you can also just see how the rest of the grades work on our site. And then could you flip again? So this is the landscape plan. This is actually the old one. I apologize for that, but in general, it's all the same amount of trees. You'll see that on both sites there. And then so these are just the elevations, and it shows you what side you would be looking at. So the Stow Road elevation is that top one. You face the wetland. That's the back side of our building there. The Fish Creek Road and the karate side. These elevations are the same ones that you guys just approved for the Kent Road site. Nothing different. We have materials. I have brick. I have other stuff if you guys want to see it. Yeah, I've been lugging it around for sure. And then next is the fuel canopy. And this one you can't really tell, but it does slope. On the next one you can tell, and I blew up one of them so we could really see those numbers. And underneath our trusses, it's 15.5 feet for clearance. That's for any kind of cars, trucks driving underneath there. Probably your fire trucks, if they needed to get under our canopy, they could. And that's standard. So same thing on the Kent Road site, that was standard. I think maybe it was 22 feet that was mentioned in Zach's presentation, but the high point of our canopy is actually, you can see it's 21, 7 1/4. And then if you take that from the midpoint, that is 20 feet 3 inches to the midpoint of ours. We did go out and we measured those other canopies at the Circle K and the Rebel, and from standing at the pumps to the clearance underneath at the Circle K, it was 17.5 feet. And then same thing with them, they have the canopy height on top of that. So their overall canopy is above 17.5 feet by 2-3 feet. I'm not sure how tall their canopy, the part that sits on top actually is. And here's just some nighttime photos and a rendering of what that canopy would look like. And you can see it does light up a little bit with that LED light strip that we have. And then this is just those materials again that I have. If you want to see them, touch them, feel free. And then you can see our dumpster also matches. It's an all brick dumpster, fully enclosed. We have some outdoor seating. You can see our drive-through touch screen. That's another kind of feature. That drive-through is the quieter area, just like you would do a made-to-order meal inside or a drink. It's that same thing. It's a touch screen. And there's 2 of them because some of you drive taller trucks and some of you drive smaller cars. So that's why there's 2 of them there. But if you did have a problem, there is a button you could call someone inside. So there is the option to talk, but most people, even when they're inside trying to order, they don't talk to anyone at the counter either. And then this slide shows, it highlights all of those roadway improvements Diane mentioned. So the yellow is the sidewalk. your plans, and I think some of your goals for this year is getting sidewalks in your neighborhood. It's, as you probably realize, it's not as easy as just let's throw some concrete on the ground 5 feet wide wherever we want to. This site has ditches all the way around it, so we have to figure out the grading for that, the stormwater for that. There's light poles and utility poles all along this property too. Those all have to be adjusted to grade, relocated, and then the sidewalk can go in. So it's not a quick lift. There is time and money associated with adding that sidewalk. And that would be throughout the whole frontage on Fish Creek and on Stow Road. We did perform a traffic study. We worked a lot with the city engineer about what we needed to do for this intersection. As you guys know, it is a very busy intersection, and traffic studies, when you perform them, you're given, the traffic engineer provides a level of service. So A means, hey, there's probably too much infrastructure here and you have too many lanes. So you don't usually see intersections operate at a level of service A. C means that it's adequate, great, good, working great. And then F would mean that you're probably waiting too long at a red light. And that is this intersection. It was rated at a level of service F in the existing conditions. So when we spoke with the city engineer, the goal was to not make it any worse. And you measure that based on how long you're sitting at that red light. So that is why we are adding that blue lane that's on there. That is a right turn lane in front of the Circle K, and that is to help limit how long you're waiting at that red light. So we are not making the intersection any worse than it is today. The red highlighted turn lanes are the turn lanes that we need for Sheets. They're right and left turn lanes at both intersections, both driveways, and both driveways are full access, meaning that you can turn right and left in and turn right and left out. And then with that, I am going to kick it over to the engineer for traffic, Kevin Westbrooks, and he can kind of talk through some more of how we got to where we were with the traffic study.
My name's Kevin Westbrooks, GPD Group, 520 South Main, Akron. Ellen did cover a good bit of the information, but wanted to go over just a little more detail. So as she was talking about with the improvements there, so both driveways, both off of Fish Creek and off of Stow, will both have a right turn lane in and a left turn lane, providing access places for the cars to go to get out of the flow of traffic at both driveways. You don't always see that at locations like this, but it will be provided here. In addition, as she mentioned, that blue purple right turn lane on Fish Creek there, that's being added. While it doesn't directly go to the site, it's adding capacity to the intersection so that that approach doesn't need as much green time at the signal, and it can be distributed around to other legs. And that's how we are trying to get the intersection and should be accomplished to get it to operate, no worse than it is today. Our calculations show a little bit better, but it's going to be, we're not having a big impact on that intersection, or any impact really. Get the next slide. Go over a little bit about trip generation, and you've probably seen some of this information before. And again, I'm filling in tonight for my associate who is sick, so you probably have seen Judy Bennett here before if you've been to these. So the trip generation, as Ellen mentioned, or actually I think as Diane mentioned, she was talking about that, there's primary trips, there's pass-by trips. Historically, and based on data, and we've got these big giant manuals that the Institute of Transportation Engineers puts out about trip generation. They say a gas station like this, about 75% of the traffic coming to it is pass-by. Still, all the traffic that's going to it is still turning into the driveways. In those numbers up there in the morning, entering the site, there's 190 trips. There's 190 turns going on at their driveway, turning off of the two roads, split differently. But all that traffic is not necessarily new to the roadway. Of the 190, 144 of those vehicles were going to pass by on their way to work, on their way home, on their way to the grocery store, whatever, pulling in, getting gas, getting a sandwich, whatever, and continuing on their way. The 46 up there in the AM, that's the new traffic. That's somebody who's going there specifically because they got hungry and I want to go get a sandwich, or I want to go get something, or I don't want to have to go out in the morning and get gas before I go to work. I'm going to get it tonight. So that's the 25% of the traffic. So, while gas stations are busy and there's a lot of vehicles turning in and out, it's not adding tons and tons of traffic to your road like, if you drop a Walmart in somewhere. That's all destination traffic, or it's mostly. Or a residential development. No one passes by a residential development and decides to go in and leave. That's a destination. Gas stations, those are pass-bys. So it reduces the overall impact. And then where the impact actually is, where the big numbers are, is the vehicles turning in. We've accommodated that with the turn lanes, putting it on both roads, both directions. I think somebody had asked about the distance. It might have been President Council here. Distance from those intersections. Measured center to center, the driveway to the intersection, it's right around 300 feet. So in both directions. So, and it is not quite lined up with the Circle K, but it was pushed a little farther so that the left turn lane and the right turn lane could be maximized, as well as it working well with the internals of the site. But they're about 300 feet, so we've got some good distance. The worst is old gas stations that used to have, 2 driveways on each road, and one was right at the corner and one was a little bit away. That's not what you've got here. You've got 2 separated driveways that are pushed as far on the site as they possibly can to minimize the impact to the intersection and provide the most room for those turn lanes. I think that's probably the highlights of the traffic, but I'm, welcome you to ask any questions if you've got any regarding the study. I think it's probably been covered, but if anyone has any.
Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you. The driveway that's going to be installed on the Fish Creek side, just across the street from the Speedway. Right now there's no access to that property for any reason. With this proposed property, how many conflicts are going to be created now with the movement of traffic, left turn movement in both directions, in and out, are going to be created by this proposed property from a traffic standpoint?
So you asked me to what extent is that a conflict, or how many you're looking?
How many
for
conflicts are being created for movement of traffic, right?
Yeah. So everybody who turns left off of Fish Creek into that driveway is a potential conflict. The numbers we're talking, and I could dig through. I've got the study here on my tab if you want to get the detailed numbers, but that's the reason that turn lane is being put in there, is to minimize that conflict. Give that driver a place to get over, get out of the through lane, let the cars coming behind him not get frustrated, let them go. The green light's ahead, let them pass. He's out of the way. And you've got cars opposing. Well, I've got a safe place to sit until that traffic passes, then I can make my turn. So every turn, I guess, is a conflict. There's going to be, in the morning, there's going to be 190 conflicts. But, the turn lanes have minimized those. The right turn lanes going into the site on both roads is to let the traffic flow by, get that guy, traffic's moving minimum 35, during high speed, less busy times, but get that guy out of the way into his right turn lane as he's starting to slow down so that it doesn't hold the traffic up and they can pass by. So these improvements are to minimize the conflicts, is why those are put in there.
I understand. Mr. Collin, can you bring up go back to the picture that shows the proposed turn lanes? I think there is in this presentation as well.
I think just back one slide.
Yeah. So the left turn movement, obviously, the information provided, I agree. I've heard people say it's going to increase traffic. It's not. When you look at the traffic numbers, I don't know how old the ones that I looked at, but that leg going past, or westbound, I think it is, or westbound on Fish Creek, that's the most traffic going that way. I think there's almost upwards close to 16,000 cars a day that goes that way. So my question is, if you've ever been on that intersection when that school lets out, what assurance do we have that left turn turning into Sheets now is going to accommodate? How many cars can that accommodate for left turn before now we start queuing back into the intersection?
There's probably room for a couple vehicles. if they're packed up tight and the car starts to edge forward because he doesn't have, there's no reason he can't start to exceed the turn lane itself, move forward. You could probably get 3, but 3 vehicles in there and is probably enough when there's, we call it random arrival. Not everybody shows up in the first 5 minutes of the hour, but if we're looking at 190 trips coming in, split those among that. I mean, even 190 is about 3 a minute, a little more than 3 a minute. I don't think most people. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, as you were saying, there's multiple ways to get in. If you're coming up Stow, you can go through the intersection, turn left into that driveway. If you see a couple cars, you could also take the left onto Fish Creek and take the right turn in. But 3 cars a minute into the site on the average during the busy times. When you've got 2 access points, I don't see it getting more than a queue of 1, 2, maybe 3 if they all happen to be following each other to pull in there. So we're pretty confident that should be adequate left turn storage to handle during the peak times.
I mean, how many anticipated when you guys do these calculations, or even site selection? How many? I guess during lunchtime I heard upwards of 10 cars, maybe an hour for the drive-through. How many? What's the traffic count? Or is this I know in some cases sheets are 24-hour operation. Is it the intent of this sheet to be a 24-hour operation?
I believe it is. Yes, 24-hour operation.
So what's the daily? And I'm not looking beyond like 6 o'clock or whatever. Once peak time ends. But let's say during the regular business day, from the beginning of peak time to the end of the day, work day. Well, how many vehicles do we anticipate coming? Do you guys have any kind of numbers that would indicate what you would see based off the traffic counts in either one of these driveways?
So I'm looking, based on the same data that provides our trip generation stuff, it may be different than what maybe their marketing guys, because they're probably looking at transactions and gallons of fuel and how many sandwiches they sell. We're looking at numbers. I'm sorry. Digging through. I mean, it could be a couple thousand, trips in a day. Obviously, as those charts were shown, we had up there, that we do most things based on the peak hour, because even the 2,000 divided up among, or it's 1,000, whatever the number might be, divided up for the hours, that's not realistic, because it's 2 in the morning is not the same amount of traffic as 4:30 in the afternoon. So we focus on those 4:30s to try and accommodate the busiest. And that 4:30 hour, we're looking at like 190 trips, 190 new turns coming into the site, divided up over the hour, divided up over 2 driveways, divided up over 4 directions. It starts to water it down, which is nice.
And that you may or may not know, or Mr. Jones, you might be at the current left turn headed to turn left onto to go northbound Stow Road. What's the current length of that designated left turn lane currently? And is this configuration reducing its current length to allow for the left turn movement for the proposed sheets?
Yeah. Oh, yes, Mr. Young. It does not. Right now, I've got an aerial pull up. It's kind of it's definitely marked out there, but then it kind of becomes like it's not completely properly marked. This will, if you go back to that other plan, this is going to define it a little more. If you see the hashed out areas, by doing some widening and fully marking it, that distance that's still shown with the 2 arrows up there for that turn, that's going to be the same length that it is today. This is not, the left turn going into the driveway is not reducing that marked length.
Okay, and I guess on the northbound side, we're putting in, I don't see the arrows in the purple, but I thought I heard mention that that's going to be a designated right turn lane, or is that just widening to allow traffic to get around those who are wanting to go through?
That's a dedicated right turn lane.
Okay, so if we're putting that over there to accommodate for the left turn movement, why aren't we considering, in the amount of right of way we're going to gain in this project, why isn't Sheets proposing a designated right turn lane to turn southbound onto Stow Road right? You know, so if queuing gets backed up, then we're backed up. We're in no better situation than we are. And you're not even proposing a right turn lane to keep traffic moving. You know, that's
Yeah.
an improvement. I'm not asking you to take it a level F to a level A,
Right.
but I don't, you know, what you're proposing here, I don't see. And you said it yourself, right? We're barely getting above a level F, right? We're not making that significant of an impact to where we could say we improved it. Really, all this is to accommodate ingress and egress to the proposed business. That's what these improvements are for, correct?
That's what the red improvements are for, is to help the ingress and egress and keep you know, make sure that that's not causing an impact on the roads. The purple is to keep the intersection flowing at least as good as it is today. And
Have
the
you ever
intersection has
have
a
you
lot
ever
of-
been on Fish Creek Road and headed that direction and saw how traffic backs up?
Yeah.
If there was ever a location that needed a designated right turn lane to continue traffic moving, it's not over there, it's there. So right now, I don't see how you haven't made the case to where it's improving anything. It's really, this is a necessary cost for Sheets in order to get people into their business.
Mhm.
It has nothing to do, we could sit here and talk about the impacts to traffic, but you haven't shown that level of service is changing from an F to an F to an F. It's not
Oh,
changing.
we have shown that. The data's in the study.
So but if we're at a level service F now, what's these improvements are changing it to what level of service?
So based on our calculations, I'll pull the actual numbers up here so I can read them to you. So the current intersection by our calculations, and we project out to the design year, which is 10 years after, you know, it's open. The intersection is a level of service E with an eastbound, which we're considering Stow, the eastbound, much like it's oriented here on that. That's a level of service F, that approach, just what you're talking about. That's the one approach that's failing with an overall E. With the signal retiming that Sheets is offering up, as well as the additional turn lane where we're allowed to, or gives us the opportunity to push some of the green time that we've got, push it around to try and make things better. We've got the overall intersection as a D, which sounds like, you know, if you got that in school, that's still not good enough. But D is considered acceptable, yeah. D for done, and back in school, no. And with that same approach, it's an F going to a D. So the numbers show that it's actually making it better. Now, probably anybody is going to say, man, you're not making it better. But you know, the calculations at least show, hey, we're not making it worse. That's the typical standard for a traffic study. Hey, if you can make it even better, that's great. But at least don't make it worse. We shouldn't, the driving public shouldn't have to suffer because Sheets wants to come in here. And that's the standard that we're shooting for. This intersection, I mean, we looked at a variety of things to try to make it better. We looked at an additional through lane. Well, you'd either have to go back to the center of town all the way through and get out to Kent, you know, to put this turn, you know, a through lane to make it useful. That just, you know, we're talking millions of dollars upon millions to do that. Well, that's well beyond the scope of this. We looked at right turn lanes anywhere else. And this is the one that kind of popped up that allowed us to retime the signal to get it to at least where it's at today.
No, I appreciate the information. You answered all my questions.
All right, thank you.
Everything else,
It's a tough one. And this intersection is, like you said, it's pretty bad.
I understand.
Pretty
Everything,
heavy traffic.
a lot of things look good on paper and everything else, and time is the only true test to
Yes.
tell whether something works. So I understand that. I really appreciate, you know, the answers to my questions, and I'll have more questions related to other aspects that other members can answer at this
Glad
point in
to
time.
answer.
I guess another question, real quick, where I have you, Mr. Jones. We don't have any pedestrian crossings at this intersection at all, correct?
That's correct.
Why wouldn't we consider why did the city ever approach Sheets to be a partner in creating some sort of pedestrian crossing at this intersection to bring traffic out from other side of the community? Because right now, I mean, there's no way to cross there. Not to say people don't cross there, but there's no safe way to cross there. Did the city approach Sheets about that?
We spoke with Sheets about the potential to get residents across Stow Road to the Circle K intersection, and they are accommodating the crossover area to where we could in the future put a crosswalk across that area when we do the whole intersection.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again.
Welcome. Anyone else?
I'd like to ask if you have any further insight on pedestrian traffic impact from this, because as Mr. McIntyre mentioned, like we had a presentation last year about how this intersection is already problematic, and especially in terms of pedestrian traffic and safety. There was a study in, I believe, 2021 that showed 152 people a day walking on parts of this intersection that did not have sidewalks. And so I really appreciate that sidewalks would be added to part of it, and that these improvements to vehicle traffic would be made. But are you able to comment on the impacts for pedestrians, especially because adding lanes now could make it even harder since we don't have crosswalks?
Yeah, thankfully, right at the intersection, that purple lane, that right turn lane, that is making that crossing a little bit longer. There's an extra 12 feet on that one. The right turn lanes and the left turn lanes, the red ones up there, thankfully those are not adding to the width. The radiuses, the radii at the corner, those are staying where they're at, except for that bit added on there. It's tough because this thankfully I'm looking at an aerial right now, so you'll have, once this is done, you'll have sidewalk at 3 corners. You're getting there. It's tough to add the pedestrian facilities to a signal without putting the accommodations to get them somewhere, because it's almost like you got to piece, and at some point you kind of jump in and you do the rest of it. Okay, now we've got sidewalk on 3 corners. Once we get that 4th one, maybe that's when maybe the city looks to put in the pedestrian crossings with the signal to get people safely. If you put the crossings now, you've got nowhere to get them on 2 of the corners. It's kind of rough. I'm sure it's a goal of the city to get sidewalks up and down and get but it's probably a bit of a juggling act to decide where to put it and where to best put their infrastructure. But I think having the sidewalk now, getting it onto the 3rd corner, is going to be a nice step towards getting to the point where pedestrians are well accommodated instead of kind of forgotten over there.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. We can proceed.
All right, thank you.
And just to follow up on that, those existing turn lanes that are there now at the intersection, those are remaining the same length. We haven't shortened those up at all. So as he mentioned, we're just redefining them. With putting in all those red turn lanes for us, we do have to widen the road a little bit. We're just not making all your existing lanes more narrow. So again, that's part of that redefining, but the actual length of the left turn lanes that are existing, those are not changing. And then also, we had a lot of conversations with the city engineer about what to do at this intersection. And one of the comments that, or one of the things that we got to was that Sheetz is just coming to the table now, and we are not responsible for fixing everything that is the matter with the intersection at the moment. We are just trying to mitigate it as much as possible, improve where we can, and that is what we have done with this plan. But we discussed several options with the city. We talked about, well, what about putting in a new intersection? But ultimately, or a new signal at the intersection. Ultimately, that's not going to change anything. It's just going to look prettier, but it's not going to change the overall function. We talked about that through lane, but that through lane can't just be accommodated in front of the Sheetz site. It's going to have to be a longer distance. So putting that in it's not going to match up across the intersection, and it's not going to carry through past the intersection. So it really needs to be an overall look at the area, not just this intersection and what needs to be done to improve it. So again, this plan is to do the best we can with what's available, and that is why we're doing the blue right turn lane and then our turn lanes into our site and then the sidewalk. And then Zach, could we go forward to, from that, we talked a lot at the other meetings too about the wetland and about the stormwater and what's all going to happen. So this is an existing conditions map. It's color coded. Everything in red goes to the corner of the intersection. That's where it drains to. Everything in blue drains to the wetland and then goes out to what that it says 84.6 feet. That's the spillway, and then it goes into a ditch at the road. Eventually, then that works its way down to the same point in red, so it all kind of flows to the same area eventually. But the blue area goes to the wetland first, and then to the road, and then meets up with the red spot. The area in green flows down below. We're not touching it. It will continue to look that way in our proposed conditions. Some other things to note on this, the blue area, you can kind of see the wetland. It's a little bit shaded different in the blue. That is the lowest part. So everything coming out from that area goes up in elevation. So if you look towards that residential home next to us, that elevation is higher than the wetland. It will continue to be higher than the wetland. At the property line, it's about at 1112. That wetland elevation is around 1110. Those two elevations will remain the same. There will always be that difference, that grade difference. So the water will continue to drain down to the wetland, not down to the house. And then if you go to the next slide, this shows our proposed conditions. The colors aren't exactly the same, but the red area goes, you can see that red arrow. Everything in red is on our site. It drains to our underground detention, which then flows to that red arrow, which is where it goes today anyways. Everything in blue, and then it was supposed to be in like a tealy kind of blue, but instead it just like looks like an aqua green. All of that still flows to the wetland area. You know, I talked about that grading that we changed before. So again, it will flow to the wetland, fill up the wetland, and we do have to do some regrading because before that spillway was right where our driveway is in red. We have moved it to that blue arrow is where we're going to move it to. And then that little triangle green piece, same thing. Everything there flows to down. It's still going to do that. And then here is our underground detention system. Diane mentioned it's underground. You can see these chambers. Everything in that red area will flow here. We have 2 isolator rows is what they're called. And so it cleans out all the leaves, all the trash. Those first 2 rows clean those out. And then it goes to the rest of the system and hangs out in there until it gets to the outlet control structure, which is on the next slide, if you could, Zach. Oh, this is still more of the underground detention. That here we go. There's the control structure, and you can look at the details, but I feel like it's easier to see in this 3D image. So this control structure, everything from the detention will flow to that, and then it is it's a structure that slowly releases the water to match the current conditions. And all of the engineering behind this has been reviewed and approved by the city engineer. We meet all of the city requirements for this, but I can give you all the numbers if you would like to see that. But this is what that outlet control structure is going to do, and then it's going to put it, as that previous picture showed, that red area goes to the arrow, goes out to your public stormwater system. And then this here is our revised wetland map. As mentioned, we did gain back a little bit of wetland. This shows the calculations we have on that. So we have 0.383 acres of wetland that remain. 0.604 acres we are going to mitigate through credits, and the total existing wetland is 0.987. And I am going to pass it off if you could, Adam, to talk about our wetlands.
Hello, my name's Adam Berenger with HEW. The address is 5160 Esley Road in Menor, Ohio. You want to go ahead and go to the next one? This is just the background of HEW in general. Sheets hired us as a consultant to help out with the environmental regulations. We do everything from wetlands, IH, geological stuff. So I'm not going to read, word for word on this, but we are not affiliated with Sheets. They have hired us to be a secondary company to come in and help essentially assess their site. So the site details, as everyone's kind of gone over before, it's about 5 acres in site. We did a full wetland delineation over it in May, and we did determine that there was, you know, about a little over half acre of wetlands on site. For that or plan to be impacted, there's almost an acre of wetlands that are on site. For their mitigation that they plan to be using, they're going with a 2.5 to 1, which is up towards the higher threshold for mitigation. It starts all the way down at 1.5 to 1, and it goes all the way up to 3. So we're using 2.5 to 1, which is kind of in line with a forested, isolated wetland in mid to low quality. So with that in mind, they're going to be purchasing upwards of 1.7 credits for mitigation, and just for a hindsight, you know, that's a pretty good ratio for mitigation needs pending these wetlands that we have on site. So a little bit going into the wetland details. Ohio categorizes wetlands into three categories: a Category 1, Category 2, and a Category 3. Category 1 wetlands are typically suboptimal wetlands. They're either your ditches, they're in your ag fields. They're not great habitat. They're just there. Water pools. Oftentimes you see cattails, high invasives, and so forth. A Category 2 wetland is what they call an average wetland. Not great, but not bad. And then they have Category 3 wetlands, which are pristine wetlands that don't normally get touched, are very hard to get permits for, and are typically in park systems, you know, with old growth forests, native prairies, and so forth. And on the site that we developed, or we assisted Sheets with, those wetlands did key out to be a Category 1 wetland. So they're not great wetlands. That's not saying they still are a wetland, but the reason why they're a Category wetland is a lot of the scoring comes from habitat and from where the relationship is between that wetland and the proximity of its buffer. And in this area, there is one large buffer. What is that? I think to the southwest. But other than that, it's commercial property, and residential home. And that gives it a pretty small buffer. And based with that and the habitat that is not necessarily great, we are, you know, deeming these a Cat 1 wetland, which by definition makes it a not a great a wetland that's highly sought after. So with that, even though that these wetlands are a Category 1 wetland, we are mitigating them as they were a Category 2 wetland. So that's where that 2.5 to 1 ratio comes into play. We are within the same watershed. We did find one bank that is just on the very southern clip of the watershed. It is in Congress Lake down in Hartville in Stark County, Ohio. They have about 43 acres of credits available, of forested wetlands. And I know it is very difficult to find wetland credits as a whole. And the reason why there's so many of them, because this bank is notorious for being a very high priority bank. You know, it has the credits are they're priced higher than average. They're to a wetland that is already kind of higher than what most mitigation banks start with as a baseline. So with that being said, the wetlands that are being impacted on this site will directly correlate into assisting a larger scale Cat 3 wetland or Category 3 wetland to become even a better habitat, features, and all that kind of stuff moving forward. There are other ways that we could potentially mitigate for these wetlands, and there's, you know, the on-site mitigation, which the EPA and the Corps tends to not really go for because it's kind of hard to monitor and maintain. And then there's the in lieu fee. If there were no wetland credits available, we use a program called the in lieu fee, which is essentially a promissory note saying you now have to pay over market for wetland credits, but they're guaranteed to when they are available, they can kind of get shoved to where they need to go. Most of those are run by governments and state agencies like the Nature Conservancy, park districts and so forth. So that we kind of were lucky in the fact that we did find a mitigation bank available, and we are in the process of purchasing those credits and moving forward with that. And as for the actual permit, the permit is a Ohio Isolated 2 permit based on the impacts. That gets determined by the Army Corps. The Army Corps comes out and checks our boundaries when we finish our delineation. They'll come out with us, walk the whole site, and give us a yay or nay if they agree with our boundaries. If they don't agree, we do have to come back out and redelineate and suffice to them, because they are the final say when it comes to delineations. But with that in mind, they did issue us an AJD, and in that AJD is an approved jurisdictional determination, and they deem that these are isolated features that are not connected to any regulated water bodies. So that would be like a navigable waterway. Think of the Cuyahoga and the Tusk and so forth like that. And even if there is a tributary to that waterway that kind of connects to it, it still would classify it as jurisdictional. So these are all isolated wetlands. We are moving forward through the Ohio EPA permit process. Even with that in that process, we do need to have multiple design plans, multiple layouts, multiple ways that we can say, hey, here was like the worst case scenario that the original plan was to impact X acres, and now we were able to manage to shrink it and reduce it to this amount of acres. And with the EPA, they're very stringent on that. They really want the finite details to make sure that you are minimizing all the wetland impacts as possible. And then alongside the permit, we do coordinate with all local and federal agencies for wildlife, for threatened and endangered species. And as of now, everything that we've received back has been conclusive that there's nothing there that is any high importance. So no threatened species, no endangered species, that whether it be that federal or the state level. And if, for say, they did come back where there was like a threatened or endangered plant there, that would kick that wetland up to a Cat 3, making the permit process a little bit more difficult and likely not so possible. But I don't foresee that being a factor, since we did receive coordinations from them stating that there's nothing there. So that's more or less the gist of my wetland talk. I'm sure I'll take any questions.
Any
if
questions
anyone
from
has
council?
any. Everyone likes to talk about wetlands, I know.
Mr. McIntyre.
My question is not so much, that's a lot of information. I commend you for being a subject matter expert on that. There's a lot. I mean, all the questions I had related to it were ecological, but you answered all that when you said there's no species, nothing along those lines.
Yeah.
My questions are more along the lines for the impacts to what's going to be remaining and the pictures. Zach, can you back up, I guess, to maybe one more? There was, I think, another one too. Keep going. Right there. So, if I understood correctly, the purple, so to speak, all drains. My overall question is what impact is this proposed? Because I can see the elevation changes around the perimeter there are pretty steep elevations. So what's our elevation of our finished grade above of the red relative to the purple?
So we've been discussing that for many reasons. We believe that wetlands, based on the topo and based on the site gradings, in 10 years' time will most likely become larger. It will most likely kind of fill in the void that was kind of impacted by the building footprint itself. Based on the topo, I don't really see it kind of expanding uphill. They don't typically tend to do that unless it's a super saturated condition. So based on the topo lines and kind of where the site grading plans are, we can kind of predict that maybe 10, 15, 20-year time frame from now, that whole strip could potentially come back as a wetland. Okay. So the red is about 5 feet higher in grade, which should be a significant amount of elevation change to kind of split the two. And up until you kind of see where it says, where the blue there, where it's that 111 elevation line, all the way up to like the 112. They're kind of, that gradient there, we've been kind of seeing how that might look eventually over time. We can kind of predict that that area to the north there might also, or to the northeast, might also have some wetland characteristics over time.
So if there's a 5 feet difference in elevation in a rain event, that wetland drains towards Stow Road, correct?
Yeah.
So with the proposed development, where's the water going to go to then? Because does it just go right across the?
Yeah, a lot of it's going to be probably with the underground retention system that will have house quite a bit of it, and then within those wetlands itself, they do have quite of a big capacity to hold water.
Yeah, but my question is how does the water from the wetland get to that retention system?
It's just going to be ground fed.
Can I speak on that?
Yeah.
The wetland and our detention don't mix together. They're completely separate systems. So until you get to the road where, see how the blue arrow goes up towards the road?
That'll be the new outfall for the wetland?
Yes. And so then it will travel across. There will be some ditch and some enclosed part of the stormwater system. And then eventually, as it does today, it works its way towards the intersection and it will meet up with ours. But that's all as it does today.
The current topography all flows that way now towards Fish Creek or towards Stow Road?
It flows towards Fish Creek.
Fish Creek, okay.
Yep. So if you go back maybe one more, Zach. So that it says spillway up at the top.
Correct. That's where it all flows to now.
So that's where the wetland flows today, and the red area flows basically to that same corner. It says main drainage analysis point is what it says up at the intersection. That's where the red area flows to.
Okay, and you see no impacts in terms of, because I know, has there been subsurface explorations to determine how deep any organics are? How deep is the excavation going before you guys get down to suitable material for a foundation?
Yeah, we have all that information. I don't have it on me right
I'm
now.
just curious.
Yes, we've done all that, and yeah, they don't commingle the two detention.
What kind of rain event can this wetland accommodate before it actually starts making its way through the ditch?
We've analyzed. I want to say that it's the 100-year, and we've worked all this out with Mike about the different analyzations that we've done. But we've ran our programs on both the detention pond and the wetland areas and how everything will be impacted and how the outlet structures work.
Pre-construction and post-construction.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
So I mean, 100. So you're saying that the wetland as it will be post-construction will still be able to handle a 100-year storm the same as it did with the entire footprint of that wetland?
Yes, because part of that wetland we're cutting off and we're putting it to our underground detention system. But yes, yep, it's all been ran that way and it ran through the city of Stow for their approval.
Okay, Mr. Jones, I saw it's the same as the Mudbrook. So basically, this takes a 100-year storm and brings it down to what event? At the point of discharge.
2 year.
2 year. Same as over. It's the same. Like at the fog development when that question was raised, it takes a 100-year event and brings it to a 2-year event at the point of discharge.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
I think there's just maybe one more slide on the photometric if we wanted to talk about it.
We have a question here. Mrs. Coffey.
Just one other question. So the credits would be purchased in Stark County. Are there none available in Summit County? Someone mentioned at the Planning Commission meeting.
There's not. So wetland credits are reserved with watersheds, not necessarily cities and counties. It's all within certain watersheds. And the watershed that we are in is the Cuyahoga watershed, and it goes all the way down to Stark County. So we are still within the watershed that credits need to be purchased with. For.
Mr. McIntyre.
What does that cost? You threw out a lot of things saying we're elevating it up to 2.5, and for
So this mitigation bank. So every wetland credit is typically done per acre. In average, it's about 80,000 an acre. This bank does it every 1/10 of an acre, and it's 11,000 per 1/10 of an acre. So that is roughly about $100,000 per acre, which is significantly more than market value. But with that being said, it is a bank that is really reputable, and it's a well-known bank. So they, in a sense, have the right to charge whatever they need to. But it is and with that being a 2.5 to 1 ratio, it adds up quite quickly.
And for my, what is that? What are we getting for that? Like, tell me in a nutshell, what is that doing down there? At that we're building a wetland. We're
Maintaining it.
There's an existing wetland.
There
down
is an
there.
existing wetland down there. They're working to expand it. There's property acquisitions for golf courses. There's all that kind of. There's manpower, maintenance. To pull invasives, to do species inventory, to do all that kind of work down there. They use that wetland credit for, but mainly it's for growth and to maintain the credit the wetland as a whole.
Thank you, Mr. Herman.
Any other? Please proceed. Yep.
And just a reminder with that, so we have 0.654 acres of wetland that we're removing on our site, and we're paying for 1.635 acres of wetland in that area that Adam spoke about. So that's the 2.5 times the amount. Okay, there we go. So 1.7 then. And then the only other image that we have here is the photometric, and we already kind of alluded to all of this, but I think this other image on the right-hand side really shows you where those light poles are, and it's the one closest to the karate center that is causing the problems, that needs the variance, but we really do need that light pole there to light up our driveway into our site, so we do ask for that variance. Yep, just that one. And then the only other site plans next, just so we have that to look at.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre.
Mr. Collin, the karate center, is that commercial zoned or is that residential?
It's a C3 zoning.
Okay. That answers my question then, because I had the same question on the lighting last time, and even though it butts up to residential, the use for the one on Kent Road was more commercial use than it is residential use. So, okay, thank you.
Any other discussion from council or motions by committee members?
Move that resolution 25079 be moved to tonight's council agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Yes.
Yes.
It's 4 yeses. This will move on to tonight's council agenda. Now, before we do our public comment period, if you would like to comment and you have not yet signed the sheet in the back of the room, please sign at that moment. And if you would like to comment, please raise your hand. I'll recognize you, and we'll start over here. You may come to the podium and please state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Karen Jesse. I live at 1563 Bob White Trail here in Stow. I firmly believe with all my heart that this is unconscionable, that this is even being discussed about building on a wetlands. I know I grew up at 5020 Fish Creek Road, which is where Dave and Rosalina Jesse now reside. We ice skated on land that went beyond the demarcation line. You know, it's convenient. The wetlands stop here, and, you know, there's our gas station. I remember ice skating beyond where their line shows. This is very wetland. I do not buy that at all. That land is fragile. It should not be holding huge containment tanks with toxic gasoline. We're talking about a potential environmental hazard. There, with all due respect, the attorney said, quote, she doesn't have a crystal ball, which speaks exactly to my point. We don't know if those would ever leak. It's going to affect groundwater, drinking water for the residents that live near that wetlands. Their request for a variance in the height of the light canopies is ridiculous. I've been hearing Stow allows 17 feet, and they're saying, well, okay, last 2 meetings I heard 22 feet, 8 inches. Now they're saying, well, it's a little bit less. It's still ridiculous. And they want a light level increase. It's going to be 7 times what is allowed. May not be a big deal to the people from Pennsylvania that are selling this. It's a big deal to the residents that live near that wetland. The existing storm sewers, I've been hearing a lot about what they're going to do with the storm sewers. I'm concerned with what goes beyond their site, farther down Fish Creek. The residents on Fish Creek for decades have been dealing with severe flooding, serious flooding on their property, in their basements. It's only going to get worse. Lastly, I posted on Stow Strong website, a lot of you are probably familiar with it. Somebody commented on my post last week, quote, "That corner is an eyesore." I think it's a very sad day when an undeveloped plot of natural wetlands is considered an eyesore. I guess that some people feel that blinding lights and slathering concrete everywhere is more beautiful and makes it valuable. I think it's unconscionable. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, my name is Rosalena. I live in 5020 Fish Creek Road, next to that. Let's be honest, we do not need a third gas station at this small intersection, especially one that destroys wetland, endangers the safety and health of residents, pollutes the environment, and damages the wildlife. The representatives of Sheets do not live here. They are based in Pennsylvania. Therefore, they cannot possibly understand the daily challenges our community faces or the flooding that residents nearby endure every rainy season. If any of you experience what we live through, you will not permit this construction. Please consider that we have already plenty gas stations all around. We don't need one more. The City Council has an obligation to uphold the values of this community and protect its residents and natural resources. Rejecting the Sheets proposal in its current form ensures that Stow remains committed to its ordinances, its environment, and its people.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak? Raise your hand. Yes, yes, sir. Yes, in the front row here. Oh, okay.
My name is David Jesse. I live at 5020 Fish Creek Road. I brought my own stopwatch just in case. The proposed Sheets Mega Gas Station on the southwest corner of Stow Road and Fish Creek Road raises significant environmental and public safety concerns that must not be overlooked. While the project may claim adherence to zoning requirements, there are crucial gaps and risks that demand greater scrutiny. First and foremost, the partial removal of the wetlands for this project directly conflicts with the environmental protection goals outlined in the codified ordinance of Stow, particularly those in Chapter 1155. Wetlands are essential for preserving local biodiversity, mitigating flooding, and maintaining water quality. This development threatens to destroy a vital part of our ecosystem. Additionally, the proposal's reliance on underground gas storage tank introduces potential risks to the Mudbrook watershed. Any leak or failure to the storage system could lead to contamination of both the soil and the groundwater, putting the health and safety of our residents at risk. The Sheets proposal does not adequately address these concerns nor provide sufficient safeguards. Furthermore, the absence of protective measures such as concrete pylons or elevated foundations to minimize disturbance to the wetlands further undermines the claim that this project aligns with environmental best practices. This neglect of critical protective measures places the surrounding area and its residents at risk of increased flooding, particularly during heavy rainfall. Finally, there's an issue of needs. Stow already has multiple gas stations within a short distance of its intersection. The addition of another gas station is not only unnecessary, but also compromises the well-being of the community for the sake of convenience. This is an opportunity for the city council to stand with the residents and prioritize environmental protection and community health. Rejecting the Sheets proposal in its current form ensures that Stow's commitment to its ordinances and the value of its communities remain intact. Bob Adaska was a close personal friend of mine. He left us 4.5 years ago, was a member of this council. He said, Dave, if they ever build on that land, you're underwater for the rest of your life. Quote, unquote.
Thank you, sir. Who from the second row would like to speak? Anyone in the second row? Moving to the third row. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm Kevin Tichnell, 4510 Stow Road, which if you're looking at the map is the property directly adjacent in Southwest. You could actually see my house in some of these photos where I live with my wife, 2 high school daughters, and elementary school age son. So I'm going to start and end in the same place, and that is the request here is for a variance. And you've all seen in the blogs that you pulled out, the purpose of a variance is to allow this group to have flexibility when that variance provides an improvement and a benefit and an ROI to the residents. I believe nothing we've heard here tonight shows that out. I won't beat it to death. The light posts that are 33% higher than what's allowed in the regulations, the backlit canopy, the higher canopy, none of that benefits the residents of this town. Next point I had was traffic. I had a couple points here, but Mr. McIntyre, I think you made most of them for me. Number one, the slow down lanes benefit only those going into their business. Does not help our community. Number two, the 2 entrances across from each other, the Circle K and what would be the Sheets, trying to make left-hand turns less than 100 feet from that intersection, traffic nightmare. Third bullet point, this right blue turn lane. While I acknowledge it's not a blue turn lane technically, anybody who drives there knows that's a right-hand turn lane. So that does not benefit that intersection at all or residents. Next argument I heard a number of times, hey, these are the same variances as Kent Road. Well, if a motorcycle had 4 wheels, it'd be a car. It's not the same thing. Multiple gas stations here. Heard that argument a number of times. I think the young lady said she's not didn't go to business school, but went to law school. I did go to business school, and I also have an executive certificate in applied data analytics from MIT, and I can tell you why exactly businesses do this. They are better financed than the competitors in that area, which means they can offer prices lower, they can offer more accommodations, which means the other businesses go out of business. Now, I'm a capitalist. I'm all for that. But the reality is in 2 years, there's not 3 gas stations at that intersection. There's only 2, which means we're now dealing with a vacant property, probably the Rebel property, that's vacant and empty, not good for our citizens. Run out of time here for the wetlands piece. I understand what they're saying. There's a lot of hit. I can't do it in a couple seconds here. But the 11 feet, 12 inches to the adjacent properties compared to the 11, 2 inches, you cannot convince me you take a 4-acre property, drop an acre of concrete into it, it doesn't raise the water table around it. I think what that means is my property ends up getting flooded next to it. So last thing I'll close out here, again, why do we do a variance? Does it benefit the community? Does it benefit the residents? I think 2 years from now, we have a vacant gas station. We have a nightmare traffic at that intersection. We've got flooding to the surrounding properties. I think none of that warrants a variance from this group. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Anyone else from the third row? So I was just saying thank you. Yeah. Yes. Here.
Erin Mundorf, 4451 Pembroke Court. I am a 3rd generation Stowian. I grew up driving by this wetland, and I went on to study environmental engineering at Ohio State, and I work as a water resources engineer currently. So I do this work. Luckily now it's restoring wetlands, but I have done developments similar to this before. I disagree with the categorization of this wetland. Category 1 wetland is invasive cattail Phragmites wetland, like what we have in front of the Stow High School. And we all know the jokes about the Stow High School sinking in that wetland and how well the development went there. But this wetland is a bunbush swamp. We hear the spring peepers that use it as a vernal pool. Yes, it's been encroached upon, but just because it's been encroached upon, does it mean it deserves to be developed just because its buffers are smaller? Was there an ORAM verification done for this site? I would be surprised if it came out as Category 1. To their point about the credits that they found, yes, it was on the very edge of the Cuyahoga River watershed, but it's not within the city of Stow, and it's not within the county even, so how does that benefit anybody here? Then on the topic of drainage, which they got into a little bit more, I agree with the last speaker that paving an additional acre of this does not raise the groundwater table here. They mentioned that part of it will drain as it did normally, but the other part of it will drain to the wetland, and they even said they expect the wetland would expand over time. Other types of projects I work on now are flood mitigation projects. So similar to this neighborhood, when developments come in and then homeowners are later flooded, a lot of times the projects will come in after the fact, where we need to find flood storage now that all these homeowners are getting flooded out, and it's hard to find because there's nowhere to go. We're in the unique position right now to be able to utilize and protect our existing accommodations rather than push that issue right down the line. Thank you for letting me comment.
Thank you. Who else would like to comment? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is David Underwood. My office is at 3776 Fish Creek Road. Several things. As far as with the codes and everything, this project matches the codes for what the property is zoned for and stuff. Okay. The variances are very small and practically insignificant. Now, as far as wetlands, I love that term because especially with that intersection, the state of Ohio, the county, the city was supposed to expand from Route 59 to Route 91, 5 lanes. And they purchased the land to do that. But all of a sudden, when they got up to the fire department, they stopped that project. For whatever difference, that intersection, exactly what some of the people said, would flood out. So what the city and the county did was they opened my ditches up and made an ingress into my property to drain that intersection because they were supposed to put improvements in. Okay? I don't know why they never did follow through with the whole project or anything else, but the thing is, that wasn't a natural cause. That was to get rid of it and throw it on somebody else's property. So I've been paying property taxes for this property for decades. Okay? And the property, like I said, is zoned correctly. The finance project of this property is with a 5-star corporation that will increase the value, not only of that particular property, but also the tax base and everything, which all communities need. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than willing to answer.
Thank you, sir. Who else would like to comment? Yes, we'll start back. Yes.
My name's Rick Bolton. I live at 5034 Fish Creek Road. Could you back up a couple pictures to show the properties to the west of the sheets? Right there. If you take note of the driveways to the west, look at the 4th driveway. On any given day, there's traffic lined up from that driveway to that intersection. If you put a turning lane on Fish Creek to turn into that driveway, I've been a truck driver for over 40 years. Courtesy in drivers, non-existent. You're going to get 3 cars in there. You're going to have probably 100 wanting to get home, and they're not going to let them cars in. You get a 4th car, now you have a backup at the intersection. If they try to come down and turn left on the Stow to go in, and they can't get the corner, now you got to back up on Fish Creek on that end. So, I mean, it's a lot of traffic. I won't even go into about the water management, because it always drains down Fish Creek's ditches. They're not deep enough as it is to handle that water. So in conclusion, I just don't think we need 3 gas stations on one corner. It's not going to lower the price of gas. It's not going to help the residents. It's just going to make life miserable for anybody that lives on that or travels on that road. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, my name's Joyce Barman. I'm at 5016 Fish Creek. And we meet again, and I want to thank you for this opportunity that we're able to speak. First and foremost, I want to talk about safety. We have 2 elementary schools there. We have one on Fish Creek, we have one on Stow Road, and our children should come first. The amount of traffic that is there from 3 o'clock until 6:45. If you go back to the houses, we're the very first driveway. You don't have to. On Fish Creek, we're the very first house if you were to go turn, okay? That's our driveway. I've been here before. I've told you guys I work at the main campus at Cleveland Clinic. I'm on call. The times that I have to leave to get out, to get to the main campus, to try to turn left now is horrible. When we met the first time, you guys told us that with the improvements you were going to do was going to increase and better our traffic by 3%. What is 3%? Honestly, is it really necessary not only to have another gas station, and again, then Rebel goes out because of just the way that you guys have the money, Rebel doesn't. The turning lane that you have, the turn right, how many accidents, and we have the police officers, the chief here, and we have the fire department, how many accidents are already there in front of Circle K and the dollar store? It's ridiculous. You guys have the approval, you have our support. We'll go to Kent Road, to that Sheets. It's not necessary. It's another gas station. And I feel for you because you have the property and you want to sell the property, and I understand that. The wetlands, what does it do to our area, our backyard? What's it going to benefit? It's going to benefit Sheets, and it's going to put money into you guys, and then the taxes for the city. Trying to think. Traffic, the elementary schools, the zoning, yeah, that's what it's zoned for. Is it necessary? I mean, we have to think in necessity at this time. Who's it going to benefit? You know, the property we've had since 1970, it hasn't sold. Why? Ask ourselves, what is going on with this property that it hasn't sold since 1970s, since he's had it? I beg you, I adamantly oppose this gas station on the corner. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Pam Bose, 4772 Lawson. All right, I appreciate all your work. I know how hard it is to try and sell an idea, because I have too, been in that position. And I appreciate that you saw that traffic. Of course you saw that traffic, because on that northwest corner are 250 houses. On the northeast corner are 40, 50 condos. Southeast, southwest are houses, churches, schools. Of course there's a lot of traffic. We're going and leaving our homes to go to church, to go to school, to go to the post office. I think it's an educated guess that you say no traffic will come more. It will, because I know I have personally passed maybe 3 or 4 gas stations to go to your new Brimfield just to get cheap gas. I will pass it. I will go to your new Sheets on 59. I don't want this. I'm with you. I oppose it, and I sympathize with you. I wish it wasn't commercial. If you could do something, it would be great.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name's Gary Pepper. I live at 5030 Fish Creek Road. Oh, that's cool. I'm not in favor of this. I don't think we need 3 gas stations on that corner. We've got a little problem with some water on the property. And then I look at this and it says, we will then allow it to free drain into the backwoods. Backwoods is my backyard. What happens when it drains into the backwoods? It fills up my backyard, then it comes into my home. We've got 5 houses along there. We're going to get the same thing going with all of them. No, and when they dig out to put their foundation in and they put in fill, it's going to raise that water level naturally, and it's going to bring it right in my direction. You know, all of these other people. I'm just not, no, I don't think we really need it. They've got another one going over on Kent Road. God bless them. That's only 2 miles away. Do we need 2 of the same gas stations within 2 miles of each other? Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else for public comment? Please raise your hand. Yes, sir.
I'm Ryan Sorial. I live at 2942 Call Road. Keep it short. I just have a couple questions, actually. Basically, and a couple comments. I moved here.
Sorry, sir, but we don't typically have a back and forth with
with
questions. But if you
okay, then
if
I'll
you
just
raise
pose
your
them,
question, if you
I'll pose them. People can think about it themselves.
Okay, yes.
I'm wondering how fast Ohio wetlands are disappearing, and within a 10-second Google search, I was able to figure out they're disappearing pretty quick. And I also figured out that a Category 1 wetland, which actually somebody brought up that maybe this isn't a Category 1 wetland, can be improved. It's not a death sentence to be a Category 1. With careful management, it could be a better thing. Also, I've been a police officer for nearly 15 years, and I go through this intersection every day. It's a traffic nightmare already. What they're proposing will not make it better. It will not. It will only make it worse. I see what the traffic expert said. I don't necessarily agree that it's going to be better. It just doesn't seem good. Third, I agree with the fact that the marathon will probably end up being a blighted property that will be empty. That will not do anything good for the community either. You have buried gas tanks there. I'm not sure if they're responsible for removing them. But that I could just see that being a problem in the future. That's all.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment at this time? And just so you know, after this committee meeting adjourns, we will have several more committee meetings. There will be another public comment period during the committee of the whole prior to the council meeting, at which council will then discuss and vote. So seeing none, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Are we on finance? Oops.
Just giving you a heads up. That's okay. I'll speak real loud. Okay. I'll turn mine on and direct it that way.
Are we ready? I'd like to call the order the Finance Committee for March 6th and have the clerk please call roll.
Baranek,
Here.
Feldman,
Here.
McIntyre,
Here.
Harmon,
Here.
Like moving on to approval of the minutes, do I have a motion to approve the minutes for the February 20th?
Move to approve. Second.
Moving seconded to approve. All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Against, abstentions, that passes. Finance Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Baranek. Just a couple updates. Just to give council a heads up, we will be bringing forward legislation for the two big road projects, which we have been mentioning for quite some time now. They've finally come to fruition. We've gotten information we've discussed with our bond counsel, we've discussed with our municipal advisors for the debt borrowing for those two programs, and we will be bringing legislation forward to you at the next meeting on March 20th for that. Just for the residents here and the residents who are watching online, obviously we're into March already, so just a friendly reminder that April 15th is everybody's favorite day, tax day. Our department again will be offering extended hours for those who wish to come into the office to file your taxes. Those hours will be announced next week. They'll be on our website, and we will also be have them available at our next meeting for you. But I just wanted to let you know we will continue having that with our tax department with extended hours, and usually those are a couple nights during the week and on 1 or 2 Saturdays. So just to keep that in mind. And that's all I have to report this evening, Mr. Baranek.
Thank you. Any questions from Mr. Top? Seeing none, we'll move on to our business items. Kemp Sneeden.
Thank you, Mr. Baranek. The first order of business here is a request for expenditure for iLinks. iLinks is a software application that the police department uses. It's a primary software application that we use in the cruisers and the station to access the secure leads database, which is the law enforcement database in the state of Ohio. Typically, this expenditure would not come in front of you because it falls below a budgetary threshold. However, there was a billing snafu where we just were not billed for last year's expenditures. So we received a bill for 24 and 25, which puts it over the council threshold, which is why it's here today. So we'd ask that be approved so we can continue business as usual using this software application. We've used it successfully since 2007, and we're very pleased with it. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Baranek. Just real quick, there's a confidentiality thing with this software, right? Or a safeguard, right? Are we making sure we're following that? I mean,
absolutely. Leads is a highly regulated law enforcement database, so the security thresholds are extreme regarding those databases. Our IT division does an excellent job making sure we're in compliance with all those requirements.
All right, thank you, Mr. Baranek.
Any other questions? Seeing none, do I have a motion to move this on to council?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Yes.
Against, abstentions, that gets moved on to council. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Baranek. Recent development along Seasons Road required a traffic impact study to be completed. When that traffic impact study came back, it stated that a traffic signal was warranted at the intersection of Seasons and Allen. The existing conditions warranted a traffic signal. The traffic study also required a left turn lane into the development. Due to the installation of the left turn lane, the need for the developer to make those improvements within Seasons Road, Seasons Road was slated to be resurfaced this year. The city decided to not resurface Seasons Road due to the fact that we can't pick the time frame with the developer, and we did not want to resurface Seasons developer come in and put in the left turn lane, kind of chop up the road after it was resurfaced. The city decided to use those funds for that resurfacing program to install a traffic signal at this intersection of Seasons and Allen. This resolution is to allow the city to apply for TID funding program through ODOT, which is Traffic Improvement District, which would, as the resolution stated, we could apply for up to $500,000. However, the estimated cost of this signal project is $350,000, and this resolution allows us to apply to get reimbursement for this project, as it is based off of economic development and transportation planning factors. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Jones? Mr. McIntyre.
Mr. Jones, would this require any right-of-way takes?
We do not see this need for right-of-way in this area.
So the signals, would Hudson have any involvement, being that, is there any signals going to be on their side? Would they have any involvement? Would they have any involvement, or will there be any of these signals installed on City of Hudson's property?
There will be a need for a signal installed on City of Hudson's property. We are working with them to develop a cost share agreement for this project, as well as to accommodate any future development on the north side of Seasons Road.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brennan.
Any other questions? Seeing none, do I have a motion to move this on to council?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Yes.
Against, abstentions? That's on council agenda this evening. Mr. Wren.
Thank you, Mr. Baranek. This is for Assurico to do a risk management and develop an emergency response plan for our water distribution system. This process will take about 4 to 6 months. It's an EPA requirement and a federal law. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Wren? Mr. McIntyre.
What is this a new is this a new law, or why don't we have something like this already in place?
We do. It just hasn't been updated.
This is more of an update than it is a full.
It's an update. Yeah, we have it in place, but the plan is after this larger update that then we'll do this in-house in the future.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Feldman.
Thank you, Mr. Brannick. How's our new superintendent doing?
Very well. He's no complaints.
Well, I know
yeah,
we were involved, and it had to do with EPA and all those actions. So
I think in his spare time he reads the EPA information. He seems to really enjoy it. So
good.
Maybe you two will get along.
Thank you, Mr. Brannick.
Any other questions for Mr. Wren? Seeing none, do I have a motion to move this on to council?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Yes.
Against, abstentions, that gets moved on to council. Mr. Cowan.
Thank you, Mr. Baranek. The next two ordinances are related to the 5 cell tower leases, or 5 towers with leases that we went into contract to sell. 2 of the companies entered into a right of first refusal. So this first ordinance is for American Tower. You need a specific ordinance with their name on it to close on the contract. And then the second one that we'll hear next is for Crown Castle. But they are the same terms and agreements as we entered into with EIP Holdings, which took 3 of the towers.
Any questions for Mr. Cowan? Seeing none, do I have a motion to move the 25080 on to council?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Yes.
Against, abstentions, that gets moved on to council. Then I have a motion to move 25081 on to council.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Yes.
Against, abstentions, that gets moved on to council this evening. This point in time in the meeting for public comment. If you have any comment for the Finance Committee, please feel free to approach the mic, state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes to make your comment. Seeing none, I'd like to get a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Moving seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Against, abstentions, we are adjourned.
would like to call to order the Committee of the Whole on March 6, 2025 at 7:32 p.m. Will the clerk please call the roll?
McIntyre.
Here.
Real.
Present.
Fielka.
Here.
Feldman.
Here.
Herman.
Here.
Coffee.
Here.
Baranek.
Here.
We have before us the minutes from the February 20th Committee of the Whole meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve is circulated.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Those minutes are approved. Next, Mr. Riley, Law Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. 2 items real quick. Number 1, believe it or not, we are ending the first quarter of 2025. So I would like to ask that at the next council meeting, committee as a whole, we have scheduled an executive session to give my first quarter litigation update. I think those were pretty good last year. I think council liked those, so I'd like to continue those with council's approval. Number 2, just wanted to say that the Charter Review Commission has been hard at work. They had their 3rd meeting last night, and they have already gone through 6 of the 22 articles of the charter, so they are chugging along pretty fast and being very diligent. We had about a 2 hour 45-minute meeting last night, so we're working pretty hard. And so they asked that I list off their next 3 scheduled meetings. That way they get more public input as well. So the next meeting is scheduled for March 12th at 6:30. The meeting after that is March 25th at 6:30, and then April 2nd at 6:30 as well. So other than that, happy to answer any questions.
I've got a quick question for you, Mr. Riley. With Charter Review, I know Mrs. Mottram and Mrs. Kuntz and I were talking this past week. We need to make sure we're not pressured at the end. Will all those submissions be coming at once? And we want to make sure we have plenty of time to get them to the Board of Elections if approved. So I don't want to be under the gun on, oh, they're due today. I mean, I want council to be able to have some discussion.
That has been a topic of discussion at the last 2 Charter Review Commissions, and I believe it is the intention of the Charter Review Commission to bring them forward as they come up, as opposed to a big chunk of them at the end. So yes, they will have you will have those before deadline, way before. Their intention is to have everything to the council before June 1st. And that way, if there's anything else that comes up, they still have time before the August 1st deadline to submit to council.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Wright? Yes, Mr.
Yeah,
Rick.
just thanks again for the TIF presentation today, you and Mr. Baldwin. It was very informative.
Thank you for your work on it as well, Mr. Rill.
All right. Next up, any other questions for Mr. Riley? No. All right, next is consideration of business items, ordinance 25070. I'm going to remain in committee. We didn't get the information in a timely manner. I believe, Mr. Wren, you guys got it late, but haven't been able to discuss. And then, so I'll leave that in. We're behind tonight anyway. I'll leave that into March 20th. So we'll leave 25070 in committee. Next up is ordinance 25-075. I believe that's Mrs. Sinatra. Mr. Wren, is that correct? Is she here?
Yep. I'm over here.
Hi,
You
you're
can't
over
see me
there.
behind
All right.
the monitor. Yes, I tried to adjust my chair, but I couldn't.
All right, thank you.
This ordinance is updating the wage scale for 2025 through 2027 for general employees to match the cost of living awarded to the AFSCME members. In 2025, it's a 5% increase. 2026, it's a 3.5% increase, and in 2027, it's a 3% increase.
Okay, was there, thank you, Mrs. Sinatra. Before we make a motion to move, actually to have the clerk read it by its title, was there do we have some mistakes on it? Is there a version 2? I want to make sure we get the right thing on the right legislative.
Yeah, so I believe the Assistant Law Director handed out an updated ordinance earlier this evening. There was a mistake made in the pay grade 19 at the minimum range.
All right, Mr. Hooten, go ahead. We just want to make sure we get the right version on. Can you tell us what the mistakes were?
Yes, thank you. On the version 2 that you received, in the minimum in row 19 for all 4 of the different sections, if you take a look at American Legal Publishing Online, they actually have a typo on there that has the minimum
pay for 19 as lower than the minimum pay for 18. And when we were going through and doing the adding the percentages, that was just missed. So the version 2 has what the actual minimum for 19 is, and then the 5%, 3.5, and 3 in 25, 26, 27 respectively. So we would ask that you put forward the version 2.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hooten. Any other comments, Ms. Sinatra? I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh,
Apologize.
no.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'd like to make a motion to move ordinance 25. Yes, sir.
I just want to make a comment about this piece of legislation, that it's a COLA increase only to the pay scales. It's not, the general employees aren't receiving these cost of living adjustments.
That's correct.
They only, it's just to keep the pay ranges moving with cost of living adjustments, so that they still get their increases are based off of merit.
Correct.
But this is to keep pace with cost of living. So, Mr. Wren, as you can attest, over the several, these were always done every year annually, right? We come in before council and do a cost of living adjustment. And a few years back when we talked through this and this whole payroll thing, that's how we handled this, was just do it to the pay grades as we move forward, so we're not having to do an unnecessary piece of legislation every year.
Yeah, that's correct. This just moves the scale, doesn't actually go to the directly to the employees.
So we need the piece of legislation on tonight's council agenda. Is that what we're saying or no?
Yes, this is just in 115.
Yeah, I understand what it's doing. Right.
115 says that every year starting this year, this happens.
Right.
So once their negotiations, it started this year because it just so happened to be the same year's contract negotiations.
Got it. Mrs. Montrum, do you have version 2 with you? I'd like to make a motion to move ordinance 25-075 onto tonight's council agenda. Oh, yes, Mr. Brannick. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I didn't recognize you.
that was the reason.
I'm sorry.
But anyway, question I have is, are all the non-bargaining personnel covered under this, or are they all considered for merit increases?
Yes.
Every year, and are they reviewed every year?
They're supposed to be. Yeah, they should be. Definitely.
Okay.
All right. Any other comments or questions from council? Seeing none, I'd like to make a motion to move ordinance 25-075 version 2 on tonight's council agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? More discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll? No. Voice vote. All those signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? That will appear on tonight's council agenda. Next item, ordinance 25-076. Mrs. Sinatra.
Yeah, this ordinance updates the health insurance premium rates, again, based on collective bargaining for 2025, 2026, and 2027 for both the single and family coverage limits. And we also added in an opt-out program. It's $1,500 if it's a family that opts out of the health insurance, and it's $750 for a single payer.
Questions for Mrs. Sinatra on 25-076? Seeing none, I'd like to make a motion to move ordinance 25-076 onto tonight's council agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? That will appear on tonight's council agenda. I'd like to introduce resolution 25-078. Mr. Callen.
Thank you. This resolution is pertaining to the 40 acres conservation land on the west side of the city that we've discussed before, and council previously passed a general ordinance allowing us to apply for various grants. This resolution is specific to the Clean Ohio Conservation Grant, which is required for the grant application. So we're just looking for approval on this tonight. Mr. Prees from Western Reserve is here on yet another late night.
Sorry about that, sir.
Questions, so thank you.
Yep, sounds like, if any other questions for Mr. Callen? Seeing none, I'd like to make a motion to move resolution 25-078 onto tonight's council agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? That will appear on tonight's council agenda. We've heard an awful lot about wetlands, so tonight. All right, next item. Do I have a motion to hire a water specialist? Or do we want some discussion, council, from Mr. Wren on this? Or Mr. Wren, want to give us a quick little background before I make the motion?
Yeah, this is a newer employee that came from Cuyahoga Falls, chose to go back to Cuyahoga Falls, gave his 2-week notice. Tomorrow is his last day.
It's pretty quick. All right, do we have a motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded to hire a water specialist. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? You have approval, Mr. Wren, to get a water specialist. Next on the agenda is the motion, I will make it, to the reappointment of Patrick Crawford to the Parks Board as the Stow Monroe Falls City School District's Board Representative. I think I'm saying that correctly, right?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Yes, Mr. Fiocca.
I just wanted to, I've known Pat for a long time, talked to him a lot, and just wish him, you've done great work, and just wanted to just reiterate, this is an unpaid position, so the folks that do volunteer for these positions are really dedicated to our city. So, and Pat, you're one of those folks. So, keep up the good work.
Thank you, Mr. Fiocca. I've also attended a few Parks Board meetings. Patrick, you were the chair and did a nice job. Appreciate you being here tonight. Any other comments? Yes, Mr. McIntyre.
Mr. Crawford, I see it is back there again. I support this evening. I'm at a loss for words for the process that the school board had to put you through. That they couldn't even come to a sitting member and ask if they even had an interest in continuing their service. Rather, they go through and put you through a ridiculous process that could have all been avoided. I'm glad the outcome is what the outcome is. You've done a great job, and I look forward to great future great things from your service on the Parks Board. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, it's been motioned and seconded with discussion. We'll do a roll call vote. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Mr. Crawford, you are back on the Parks Board. Next item on the agenda is I'd like to make a motion that we recess to executive session for collective bargaining negotiations 121.22G4 and B, the purchase of property for a public purpose 121.22G2.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Will the clerk please call the roll?
McIntyre,
Yes.
Reel,
Yes.
Fiocca,
Yes.
Feldman,
Yes.
Herman,
Yes.
Coffee,
Yes.
Saranac.
We are now in executive session. where we discussed the collective bargaining negotiations, 121.22G4, and purchase of property for a public purpose, 121.22G2. I'd like to introduce ordinance 25-082 and ask the clerk to please read it by its title.
25082, an ordinance enacting a revised compensation and fringe benefit plan for IAFF employees for calendar years 2025, 2026, and 2027, and declaring an emergency.
Do we have a motion to move this onto tonight's council
So
agenda?
moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? That will appear in new business on tonight's council agenda. I'd like to introduce ordinance 25-083 and ask the clerk to please read it by its title.
Ordinance 25083, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to make and enter into a purchase agreement and related documents on behalf of the city of Stow with the Western Reserve Land Conservancy, WRLC, for the purposes of purchasing one parcel of land in the city of Stow, Ohio, and identified by the Summit County Auditor as parcel number 56-05657 and declaring an emergency.
Do we have a motion to move this onto tonight's council agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? That will appear on tonight's council agenda under new business. Public comment period. Now comes the time of the meeting. We're asked for comments from the audience. Should you wish to make any comments, please raise your hand and be recognized. Yes, Mr. Crawford. I'll finish while you're walking up. You'll be allowed 3 minutes to make your comments.
All right, great. Mic's already on. So Patrick Crawford, 3944 Red Wing Circle in Stow. Good evening. Start by expressing my thanks that you for your the reappointment to the Parks Board for a new 5-year term. It's been my honor to serve Stow, and I look forward to continuing. However, tonight I actually came to speak to share some information about the potential acquisition of the Mudbrook Wetland Preserve project. Your legislation tonight indicates that it will protect over 38 acres of green space and will be a public park for passive recreation. I've also heard from some of you that there's a potential for trails developed for park users. I'll preface this by saying, though, that the Parks Board has not discussed this, and I haven't discussed this with Director Narstead. So please see me tonight as a resident of Ward 4 and not as a representative that's making a recommendation or giving an opinion of the Parks Board or the Parks and Recreation Department. But I would like to direct your attention to some parts of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan that was adopted in 2022. I'll highlight some of these sections for your consideration because this was not on the radar then, but there are parts of the report that refer to natural parks and preserves. So the plan contains many recreational trends. Pages 17 through 19 of the master plan indicates that fitness walking, running, and day hiking saw 1- and 5-year increases in participation nationally, and page 24 shows that participation in those activities by an adult resident of Stow exceeds those national averages. A scientifically valid survey of the community included on pages 67 and 68 show that the 8th highest item on a list of needed amenities not being met by over 50% of Stow households is natural parks and preserves, and they're the 4th most important amenity to those households. So it seems that a lot of times we're quick to respond as a community to social media chatter, and if I made a post right now about a splash pad, I'd have over 100 comments by tomorrow morning from people saying we want a splash pad. On that list, natural parks and preserves is 6 points higher than a splash pad as far as what's most important in the community. So obviously it's an amenity that people care about very strongly. So I'll say on page 73, the consultant concluded that Stow should sustain or improve performance in high priority items in listed natural parks and preserves as one of the 6 high priority amenities. And then finally on their list of recommendations on page 76, They assess the need for up to 27 additional park acres by 2026 and nearly 4 miles of hiking and walking trails, additional hiking and walking trails. So I just wanted to share those pages for you. I imagine you have many factors to take into consideration before making a decision on what you believe. I'm closing what is best and feasible for our community. I do hope, though, that these parts that I've shared will prove useful in your research as you deliberate this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Any other comments, public comments from the audience? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? We are adjourned. I would like to call to order the regular City Council meeting of March 6th, 2025 at 8:08 p.m. Will the clerk please call the roll?
McIntyre,
Here.
Reel,
Present.
Fioka,
Here.
Feldman,
Here.
Herman,
Here.
Coffee,
Here.
Baranek.
Thank you, Mrs. Mottram. I'd like to recognize at-large City Councilman Kyle Herman to lead us in the prayer and Pledge of Allegiance.
A reading from the book of Luke, starting with chapter 10, verse 25. One day, an expert on Moses' laws came to test Jesus' orthodoxy by asking him this question: "Teacher, what does a man need to do to live forever in heaven?" Jesus replied, "What does Moses' law say about it?" "It says," he replied, "that you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind. And you must love your neighbor just as much as you love yourself." "Right," Jesus told him. "Do this and you shall live." The man wanted to justify his lack of love for some kinds of people, so he asked, "Which neighbors?" Jesus replied with an illustration. A Jew going on a trip from Jerusalem to Jericho was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes and money and beat him up and left him lying half dead beside the road. By chance, a Jewish priest came along, and when he saw the man lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed him by. A Jewish temple assistant walked over and looked at him lying there, but went on. But a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw him, he felt deep pity. Kneeling beside him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with medicine and bandaged them. Then he put the man on his donkey and walked along beside him till they came to an inn, where he nursed him through the night. The next day, he handed the innkeeper 2 days' wages and told him to take care of the man. "If this bill runs higher than that," he said, "I'll pay the difference the next time I am here." Now, which of these three would you say was a neighbor to the bandit's victim? The man replied, "The one who showed him some pity." Then Jesus said, "Yes, now go and do the same." Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Proclamations and commendations. Mr. Mayor?
None this evening. Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is we have before us the minutes from the February 20th regular City Council meeting.
Move to approve as circulated.
Second.
Moved and second to approve. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Those minutes are approved. Next item is the public comment period. Now comes the time where we ask for comments from the audience. Should you wish to make any, please raise your hand and be recognized by the President of Council. Seeing none, we'll move along to, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I apologize. Please state your name and address, and then you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hit the center button to turn the microphone on.
Hi, my name is Amy Jones. I live at 3510 Diedrich Road, Stow. And I just wanted to comment about the sheets. My biggest concern is the environment and what that will do. I know Akron had similar, they had a similar situation to this with the White Pond development. The opposition to that was citizens were voicing their opposition to the project. They said they feel the city isn't listening to their concerns, including on environment impacts at the site that they were building on. My plea to council tonight is to not only consider the impacts that building the sheets will have on the city and bringing more revenue in, but also to please listen to your constituents. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll move on to the mayor's report. I know, Mayor, tonight, I apologize, you're starting late, but we appreciate the patience you had on the State of the City address. And just to let our listening audience know, this was a charter amendment enacted on November 7th of 23. It states, it's 3.08, it states the mayor shall provide the City of Stow, council members, and the city residents with a State of the City address on an annual basis to be held at the first regularly scheduled meeting of council in March of each year. So we appreciate your time, Mayor, so go ahead. It's on to you.
Thank you, Mr. Feldman. Real quick, though, if we can take a moment of silence. I went to the calling hours today for Mrs. Lisa Richards, who was a teacher here in our district. What really I was marveled and taken back was all the thank you notes that she had over time, and her husband had them posted from the students of the great impact that she made with our students in our schools. So if we can just take a quick moment of silence for Lisa as she is departed. Thank you. Okay, I never expected to have a stenographer here for this. This is great. I don't know who planned this and to go ahead and do my State of the City. So I never had that before. So big compliment there. So no, I'm teasing you, but thank you. Again, I'm honored to share the progress and achievements and plans that shape the current state of our dynamic city. And I'll reiterate dynamic city. I'm also filled with pride reflecting on, and I will repeat this twice, what we have accomplished together. And when I say we've, it's us, it's city council, it's our administration, it's our hard, dedicated employees that really have made our city what it is in moving forward in 2025. But we're not resting on our laurels. There's still so much to look forward to as we navigate 2025, as you well know. And as some of the 2024 highlights, and it's always great to look back because you know you're doing a lot of great things, but when you get to see it in print, I think it really is something to be proud of. Again, the big thing was the acquisition and renovation of the new Stow Community and Senior Center. Ms. Narstad and her team will tell you already in about less than 2 months, we have doubled the enrollment to our seniors, which is phenomenal. They are using this facility, and it's being used in, like I said, more than what we even pictured. So we don't even have quite a number yet. We've also held a couple events, such as our Lego event and also to our Princess event, which was very well attended for our young people. As everyone knows, we opened up our new pickleball complex and walking trail at Oregon Trail Park, new playground at Meadowbrook Lake Park. We did a partial replacement playground at Adele Durbin. Plus we went and put actual area that you could, pavilion there that you can enjoy. Kayak launch at Silver Springs Park. And again, we are not even close to being matched for community events. I will put any of our events up against any city, any county even, of what we provide for our residents, and they're more than deserving as such. As we enter into 2025 here, as we all know, we're moving full steam ahead for an amphitheater. And besides the amphitheater, as every one of you know sitting in front here, this is more than an amphitheater. This is going to check some boxes off that residents have been asking for, small restaurants, downtown. So it's more than an amphitheater. And Linda and her crew are also doing a great job already starting to think about programming events year-round there. But we're moving ahead, and it's really been actually a very smooth plan as we move forward. We're looking forward to June or July to go ahead and break ground. And approximately a year later in 2026, we'll be able to enjoy this new amphitheater. Also going back, it is time. It's hard to believe I was on council at that time, but it's time for the community bus replacement. And so that is being fulfilled. We met with yesterday to talk about this. So it's going to be great for all of our residents, just not our seniors. We are doing, of course, our SOAR playground upgrade with the base material and so forth. It's been a while. Skip Playground, or I'm sorry, SOAR Playground is getting old. And like I said, as we all are, but again, we want to go ahead and keep these things up. Economic growth and development, if you see in your book, and I invite anybody in the audience or anybody at home to stop by City Hall if you'd like a printed version of this book. You will be very impressed at our economic development, both industrial and also retail, as we move forward with that. Myself and Zach Cohen actually try to go ahead and go out at least once a week to visit a lot of our businesses. I try to also reach out to at least 2 or 3 retail businesses every week also. We work very closely with our Chamber of Commerce, and that is a great thing moving forward. So again, as you'll see in that one page, there are some very impressive numbers of new businesses here in Stow. Financial management, this falls under the preview of Mr. Toppin and Miss Twig. We concluded the year with sufficient reserves in all primary funds, and we are positioning ourselves favorably for the future. Again, that ties back into economic growth, which we're doing very well with. It's also, if you look at the book, residential sector has witnessed also a significant expansion. With that being said, Miller's Landing will be starting to sell their homes right around the 1st of April. I attended yesterday an open house of their new model home. And also, too, they're already building 2 other homes as spec homes that they know they can fill right away. So our infrastructure and public service, we, again, are not even matched anywhere around with our public service to our residents, and also, too, in a cost-effective manner. Everything that we've gone back, if you look at our Stow Senior Community Center, if we would have built that on our property, it would have cost us $4.5 million. We came in at a budget of close to $1.5 million. That was the cost of buying the building, the 5 acres of property, plus also the remodeling of that facility. Also, too, is council's well aware and has been very supportive. As we look forward to the amphitheater, this will also not put any tax burden on our residents as we move forward, as Zach has said tonight, of selling the leases on our cell towers. So again, it's going to go ahead and be a tremendous payback to the community that they can enjoy all these fine amenities, but also too without additional taxes. Again, and I know this has been very important for council, our sidewalks, and we hear all the time stormwater management. We have areas, of course, our city, everybody thinks Stow is a newer city. We're way over 100 years old, so we have a lot of different tasks at hand with stormwater management. But a big hats off to Mike and Jim for following through on these things. And we are seeing improvement, and we're hearing it from our residents. Again, I say this probably the last 3 or 4 meetings. I could never appreciate more all of our workers with our snow and ice removal. It's been a heck of a winter. I know we're going to be happy to be out of this winter, and I know our guys will be happy. But again, they are very dedicated to this cause, and we certainly appreciate it. As we also look at Stow as a community that values diversity and inclusivity, we look at all of our programs with this because we want to foster a sense of belonging and strengthen the fabric of our community. We want to make it to where Stow is a place where everyone feels welcome and respected. New program that we have out on March 15th, we have our Community Expo. We started a new initiative, Helping Hands. This will be one of our first initiatives out. We're going to ask, and you everybody will be receiving a postcard in the mail asking to bring canned goods, non-perishable items to the expo so we can go ahead, number one, to go ahead and serve our Bulldog Bag program, which is a huge success, other pantries in our Stow area, and then whatever is left over, we will take down to the food bank. So that's a new thing coming up, and we have some more great plans moving forward with this Helping Hand project. But again, a great way to go ahead and help our residents. Public safety, could never be more proud of both of our public safety, both our fire and police. They will be coming out shortly with their reports. And again, it's amazing how fast Stow is growing and the needs that we have. And every day they rise up to that occasion, and I truly appreciate that. Our Summit Emergency Communication Center has been up and running for about 1 year and 4 months now, and it is doing very well. We have been able to keep costs in line by doing that. And again, besides that, it's making for a safer city. Again, I say this over and over, our exceptional workforce, whether it's in this building or it's our service or police or fire, again, we are not matched. Their dedication means so much, and we really appreciate all that. So as we reflect on our achievements of the past year, we approach the future with optimism and determination. Our city is vibrant and full of promise. I remain strong and committed to the tradition and forward-looking approach that I have had from our city council and working together. I remain dedicated to being accessible to our residents and businesses. And again, as I always tell residents, your ideas, input, and feedback are invaluable, again, in addressing the needs of our community, because as we know, Stow's potential is limitless. I want to also extend a warm thank you also to our residents, all of our businesses, all of our organizations, including our public library, who do a fantastic job collaborating with us in all of our programming, and I certainly appreciate that. So as I said before, as we embark on 2025, which we're already, as Mr. Riley reminded us already, we're closing already 1 quarter already, so it's moving quick. Again, we're looking for an exciting 2025-26 moving forward. And again, I'm always here to go ahead, a phone call, stop in the office, or a letter or email. I'm very happy to talk to anybody. And again, you can see a lot of the great businesses up there that we have experienced this year, and we've got plenty more on the grid moving forward. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate you giving us the highlights. I know you're doing this again Tuesday, March 7th. What is
18th.
it?
March 18th.
Tuesday, March 18th.
And one other thing, if you would attend, I would invite the public, you don't have to be a chamber member, invite the public to this, because at the end, we are recognizing a teacher, Megan Postak, who is a teacher at Riverview. She received the Presidential Award. It's been about 3 or 4 years, of course, government moves slow. But why this is so monumental is there was only 6 teachers recognized in Ohio. There was only 353 recognized in the United States. And here's the clincher. Stow has never had a teacher recognized with this highest of honor. So we're going to present her with several proclamations. Afterwards, we're going to do fire and police escort, parade, small parade to each one of our schools to go ahead and witness this great achievement. And we're very proud of Megan for doing that. So thank you, Mr. Fohm.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll open the floor up to council members, but we appreciate your service to the city. You always talk to residents out there, as we all do as elected officials. You are everywhere, right? I don't think we can keep up with you. And I talked to your administrative assistant, and I asked her one day, I saw her last week, I said, can you keep up with the mayor? And she says, one day ahead. She's one day ahead. So thank you for everything you do. We appreciate other comments. I'll open the floor to Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that great. Obviously, there's great things happening in Stow. There's no secret about that. I'm extremely excited about just looking at all the businesses that came into the city of Stow. For years, I'm into my 6th year now on council. Obviously, seeking re-election hopefully this year. But for at least 6 years, the one thing I've heard about this, on city council is we need this economic development coordinator. And over the last several years, this list shows that, businesses are coming to the city of Stow. Stow is where people want to be, where businesses want to come. We heard it tonight about a burger establishment coming, right? That was in a press release a lot of people saw online today. So great things are happening. Kudos to the planning department. Over the last couple of meetings, we've heard great things about our process here, and council can take credit for some of that too, right? Putting in place when they come to us and putting in this new technology to streamline processes and everything else. And we're hearing it from those who are applying for things that the process is a lot better in some cases than it was when they first applied for something else. And, kudos to you, Mayor. Kudos to your administration, and look forward to a great 2025.
I pardon myself, I wasn't here at the very beginning, but Zach, did we talk anything about the bowling alley? Because I think this is big. This is big. This has been a topic of conversation for people, and rightfully so. So if you could just address that very quickly, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, so it's been on and off for a while. It's active again. The developer, the architect, is looking to set up a meeting with us soon to go over the project, and I know they're eager to submit the plans for review for planning commission. So same concept as before that you probably saw, however long ago it was, almost 2 years ago. Kind of a young entertainment space, mini bowling, arcade area, outdoor seating, fire pits. So same concept, just slightly different layout. But yeah, looking forward to that coming up soon.
Will there be axe throwing? That's the $1 million question.
I think there might be. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other comments? Council members, open the floor to you for the mayor. We appreciate you State of the City. Looking forward to seeing you on the 17th at the Akron Memorial Post.
That's the 18th, Mr. Feldman.
18th, thank you. I don't know why I have the 17th in my mind, but
and it's for breakfast.
Yes.
7:30 to 9.
7:30 a.m. breakfast. So, all right, moving on in the agenda. Old business. I threw this on there. Mr. McIntyre and I were talking a little bit about standing committees. I'm gonna leave this and ask the clerk to move it on to March 20th. But I want to give some homework to some council members. I know we have an agenda item that says, hey, do you want it? I'm looking through the charter and council rules, and I'd like a little more collaboration on what committee we put legislation in. So I'd like you to do some homework and figure out, instead of just an agenda item, because even on today's agenda, there's a transportation thing, there's a public there's things we can put in a lot of different places. But I'd like a little more relevance to the committees, and I appreciate Mr. McIntyre's comments to me on that. So I'll give you some homework. If anybody wants to comment quickly, but I really would like to save the discussion for the 20th. Yes, Mr. McIntyre.
Yeah, the intent behind it really is to let the subject that's being requested by either planning department, planning is a no-brainer, it usually goes to planning committee. But there are things that come through, every meeting we have, road to safety isn't going to meet, or public improvements, because there's really nothing. So we're going to start letting the subject, the content or the subject of the legislation being requested kind of drive or assist the president in putting it in the appropriate committee. And as kind of the council rules kind of outline, there's some basic subjects for legislation in the appropriate committees, but that was kind of the gist of my conversation with Mr. Feldman.
Yeah, so there'll be a little more communication and collaboration. I guess I don't need this on. I think that's how we're going to do it. So you don't have to move this discussion item on. Is everybody good with that? We'll just, if you're a chair, we'll look at some things and we'll get it on that committee.
So there used to be a running to-do list, like for each committee, that had topics that would come before it or we expected to come before it. That sort of went away, when we were all termed out the first time. That should probably come back.
Yep. Well,
it's in what you're referring to is written in the council rules.
No, there was a running list that would say like, PMI committee, we have to discuss utilities and certain issues that were actually to-do lists on the agenda item. That went away, I believe, in 2020.
Oh, well, those specific details are enumerated as what is within the.
I'm not talking about general topics, Jeremy. I'm talking about specific items.
Such as, like, can you give me an example?
Okay, a topic that was on the agenda tonight, right? And that was for roads and safety or, planning, right? It was actually specific, not general topics.
Yes, and I guess I agree with what you're saying. That's what we're trying to get back.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. We'll do some research. We'll get the deputy clerk or the clerk to do a little research for us, see if he can find that, and we'll share it with council, and we'll do a little more on relevance of committee. So thank you for your comments. We'll move along. New business. I'd like to introduce ordinance 25 082, and ask the clerk to please read it by its title.
2025-082, an ordinance enacting a revised compensation and fringe benefit plan for IAFF employees for calendar years 2025, 2026, and 2027, and declaring an emergency.
I'll move to suspend the rules.
Second.
Moved and seconded to suspend the rules. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? The rules are suspended.
I move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt. Any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
McIntyre?
Yes.
Reel?
Yes.
Pioka?
Yes.
Feldman?
Yes.
Herman?
Yes.
Coffee?
Yes.
Baranek?
That ordinance passes and will take effect according to its terms. I'd like to introduce ordinance 25-083 and ask the clerk to please read it by its title.
2025-083, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to make and enter into a purchase agreement and related documents on behalf of the city of Stow with Western Reserve Land Conservancy, WRLC, for the purpose of purchasing one parcel of land in the city of Stow, Ohio, and identified by the Summit County Auditor as parcel number 56-05657 and declaring an emergency.
We have a motion to suspend the rules.
So move.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed?
No.
The rules are suspended.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt. Any discussion? Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Feldman. Yeah, I won't be supporting this piece of legislation. I haven't been supportive of it since it first came before council, or the intent behind this legislation. As Mr. Crawford indicated earlier, Parks Board hadn't even been ran through there, which is within their purview to do so, to even get some input from them. I think the city shouldn't be in the business of just acquiring land for whatever reason. I can tell you a few years back, we acquired a property over on Hibbard, and for the purposes, obviously the house was flooding, but for the purpose of it was to address stormwater issues there, and to date we've done nothing with it. Nothing. We purchased the driving range and everything else with the purpose of doing some other things. Obviously the driving range is seeing lots of improvements, but the other end of the property that had all these intentions of things doing, nothing. So I'm not supporting it tonight because I don't, regardless of who's paying for it, it's coming from the federal government. So to say the taxpayers aren't paying for it is just false. It is taxpayer funded, but I just don't think we should be in the business of acquiring properties considering it's not even been on the city's radar. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Herman.
Thank you, Mr. Feldman. I really appreciated my own talks with Mr. Crawford as chair of the Parks Board, that even though this has not gone before the board, as he came and talked to us tonight, this aligns very well with the 2022 master plan, in that they did talk about wanting to acquire more park and green spaces, and even had a goal of acquiring over 70 acres for new parks. And this isn't just acquiring land for the sake of acquiring land. This is an opportunity where the Western Reserve Land Conservancy has come to us and flagged that this property came onto the market and has Category 3 wetlands on it, and that this could fill a huge need for our city, as pointed out in the Marks Master Plan, is that our residents do want more park space to be able to have walking trails. And so I think that this aligns very well with the master plan and can serve our residents. And it's, with this agreement as we have it tonight, it would be fully funded through grant funding, and the city would not even be responsible for the closing costs. So this is literally free land for a future park for the city.
Thank you, Mr. Herman. Other comments? Mrs. Coffey.
Yeah, I agree on this. I think, the preservation of green space and wetlands, especially Category 3, and just speaking with other experts, even outside of the Land Conservancy, I just think that it's more of a benefit. I think the land, it could be mitigated. I mean, it would cost a lot, but it's potential in the future. I think it could help reduce flooding downstream. We own a lot of that land to the north. I see it as nothing but a benefit, and yet the way this is written, it would be covered completely by grant funding, even closing costs. So I agree on that.
Thank you, Mrs. Coffey. Seeing no more discussion, will the clerk please call the roll?
McIntyre. Reel.
Yes.
Bioka.
Yes.
Feldman.
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
Coffee.
Yes.
Baranek.
Yes.
That ordinance passes and will take effect according to its terms. I'd like to introduce ordinance 25-064 and ask the clerk to please read it by its title.
2025-064, an ordinance creating the Miller's Landing tax increment financing incentive districts, declaring improvements to the parcels within each incentive district to be public purpose and exempt from real property taxation, requiring the owners of those parcels to make service payments in lieu of taxes, establishing a municipal public improvement tax increment equivalent fund for the deposit of those service payments, authorizing school and library compensation payments, specifying the public infrastructure improvements that benefit or serve parcels in the incentive district, and declaring an emergency.
I move to suspend the rules.
No, I moved to
that's
table.
the second.
Yeah, we're taking
Oh,
second
no.
reading.
Oh, this is
That will constitute its second reading. I think we're,
Thank you. Mr. Brent, I move the table.
I second. You give second? All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? We will put ordinance 25-064 on the table. Next, I'd like to introduce ordinance 25 that was 064 on the table. My numbers are off today. I'd like to introduce ordinance 25-065 and ask the clerk to please read it by its title.
2025-065, an ordinance declaring the improvement to certain parcels in the city to be a public purpose and exempt from taxation pursuant to ORC 5709.40B, providing for the collection and deposit of service payments and specifying the purposes for which those service payments may be expended, authorizing school and library compensation payments, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Butler. That will constitute its second reading.
Move to suspend the rules.
Second.
Moved and seconded to suspend the rules. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? The rules are suspended.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt. Any discussion? We appreciate all your information on TIF earlier. That was very informative. And I think we're moving in a good direction, Mr. Riley and Mr. Mayor and Mr. Wren, so, and council. Appreciate you guys. All right. Will the clerk please call the roll?
McIntyre,
Yes.
Reel,
Yes.
Pioka,
Yes.
Feldman,
Yes.
Herman,
Yes.
Coffee,
Yes.
Baranek.
That ordinance passes and will take effect according to its terms. The next item, ordinance 25-070, will remain in committee. Mr. Wren will be ready on November 20th. Oh, I don't even see him down there. Mr. Mayor gone too?
Mr. Feldman.
Will we be ready?
Yes.
All right, thank you. We'll that'll remain in committee. Next, I'd like to introduce ordinance 25-073 and ask the clerk to please read it by its title.
25-073, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to make and enter into a contract with Links Corp. LLC for a software network subscription for the use of the police by the police department without the necessity of public bids and declaring an emergency.
I move to suspend the rules.
Second.
Moved and seconded to suspend the rules. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? The rules are suspended.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt. Any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
McIntyre,
Yes.
Reel,
Yes.
Pioka,
Yes.
Feldman,
Yes.
Herman,
Yes.
Coffee,
Yes.
Baranek.
That ordinance passes and will take effect according to its terms. I'd like to introduce Resolution 25-074 and ask the clerk to please read it by its title.
2025-074, a resolution authorizing the mayor of the city of Stow to file a grant application with the Ohio Department of Transportation for Transportation Improvement District Program funds and directing the finance director to allocate funds towards the Seasons Road and Allen Road signal project and declaring an emergency.
I move to suspend the rules.
Second.
Moved and seconded to suspend the rules. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? The rules are suspended.
Move to adopt.
Moved and seconded to adopt. Any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
McIntyre,
Yes.
Reel,
Yes.
Pioka,
Yes.
Feldman,
Yes.
Herman,
Yes.
Coffee,
Yes.
Baranek.
That resolution passes and will take effect according to its terms. I'd like to introduce ordinance 25-075 and make sure it's version 2 and ask the clerk to please read it by its title.
2025-075, an ordinance amending chapter 115 COS entitled Personnel Policies and Procedures and Payroll, particularly section 115.01 entitled General, and declaring an emergency.
I move to suspend the rules.
Second.
Moved and seconded to suspend the rules. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? The rules are suspended.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt. Any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
McIntyre,
Yes.
Reel,
Yes.
Pioka,
Yes.
Feldman,
Yes.
Herman,
Yes.
Coffee,
Yes.
Baranek.
That ordinance passes and will take effect according to its terms. I'd like to introduce ordinance 25-076 and ask the clerk to please read it by its title.
2025-076, an ordinance amending chapter 115 COS entitled Personnel Policies, Procedures, and Payroll, particularly section 1115.03 entitled Fringe Benefits and Other Compensation for Full-Time Employees Not Included in Previous Articles, and declaring an emergency.
I move to suspend the rules.
Second.
Moved and seconded to suspend the rules. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? The rules are suspended.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt. Any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
McIntyre,
Yes.
Reel,
Yes.
Pioka,
Yes.
Feldman,
Yes.
Herman,
Yes.
Coffee,
Yes.
Baranek.
That ordinance passes and will take effect according to its terms. Item H, I'd like to introduce ordinance 25-077 and ask the clerk to please read it by its title.
2025-077, ordinance authorizing the mayor to make and enter into a contract with Assurico Risk Management and Regulatory Compliance LLC for the consulting services for EPA compliance for the Water Department without the necessity of public bids and declaring an emergency.
I move to suspend the rules.
Second.
Moved and seconded to suspend the rules. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? The rules are suspended.
I move to adopt. Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt. Any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
McIntyre?
Yes.
Creel?
Yes.
Yocum?
Yes.
Feldman?
Yes.
Herman?
Yes.
Coffee?
Yes.
Barron?
That ordinance passes and will take effect according to its terms. Item I, I'd like to introduce Resolution 25-078 and ask the clerk to please read it by its title.
2025-078, a resolution authorizing the city of Stow to file an application with the Ohio Public Works Commission's of Clean Ohio Conservation Program for the grant for the acquisition of Mud Brook Wetlands Reserve Project.
Move to suspend the rules.
Second. Moved and seconded to suspend the rules. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed?
No.
The rules are suspended.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt. Any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
McIntyre?
No.
Creel?
Yes.
Yocum?
Yes.
Feldman?
Yes.
Herman?
Yes.
Coffee?
Yes.
Barron?
That resolution passes and will take effect according to its terms. Item J, I'd like to introduce Resolution 25-079 and ask the clerk to please read it by its title.
2025-079, a resolution granting site approval to Timothy Wright, GPT Group applicant on behalf of David Underwood, owner, to grant a conditional zoning certificate on the property located at 4984 Fish Creek Road in the city of Stow and granting certain variances.
I move to suspend the rules.
Second.
Moved and seconded to suspend the rules. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed?
Abstain.
The rules are suspended.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt. Any discussion? Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mr. McNair.
Thank you, Mr. Feldman. We looked at all this stuff. I appreciate all the information that she's presented today. It's for us going through the zoning code. There's a lot. I understand. From the traffic impact to the wetlands and everything else that has to be considered. I know it was put out to this body. I've been faced with this. With these types of votes before for property and everything else. It's not easy. I know she's representative said earlier, you have to look at the criteria. Does it meet the criteria? Right? In this case, it's not permitted by right, it's permitted conditionally. Right? So there's 4 parts to this whole, or 3 parts to this whole thing. We're reviewing the site plan to ensure that it meets zoning code requirements. 2, because there are 2 conditional use requests for the drive-through and for the gas station, there is a separate set of standards that we have to look at. And those are the only things that we can use to base our decision on whether it meets those standards or not. And second is the variance. There's a little more flexibility on variances. It's asking us to vary from our zoning code. We're not, if we feel that it's going to be, it's not going to have a benefit. I think somebody said earlier to the community. So those are the 3 things that we're looking at here, right? So it's not permitted by right. For me, I'm gonna be right out with it. Looking under the zoning code for the site plan review criteria, there's a couple things that stuck out to me. Specifically, the one that stuck out to me the most, let's see here. The plan, to the extent practical, will preserve and be sensitive to the natural characteristics of the site. In this case, I don't think it meets that condition. When you're taking, I looked over more than half of the wetland to put there, you're building up the site on top of it. It doesn't meet that. I mean, it's some of these things are very subjective. Is it going to result in harmonious grouping of buildings? Is it going to meet those things, right? There's gas station across both streets. Is that harmonious? Yes. There's residents next door. So some of these things, in my opinion, don't make sense. Secondly, for me, it's the impact on traffic. It's the impact that I said it in the committee meeting. We're not improving any traffic. All we're doing is, I think I heard, is like over $1 million investment into the intersection to improve 7-second delay. The evidence to me didn't suggest that it's going to impact, that it's going to change that level of service to what was proposed. It's nothing more than $1 million investment to be able to get the vehicles in to patronize that business. So for me, I will not be supporting this legislation this evening for those reasons.
Other comments? Yes, Mrs. Coffey.
I echo what Mr. McIntyre said. I think it was very well said. I feel the same way.
Other comments? Just a quick, can you, before we do a roll call vote, Mr. Cowan, what was the planning commissions? I just want to make an, section 1006 of the charter. Just want to make sure council's clear. Go ahead. What was the vote?
Planning Commission's recommendation was for denial. It was 4-0 for denial.
So section 1006 of the charter, notwithstanding section 4.1, no resolution, ordinance, regulation, measure, order of council which violates, differs from, or departs from the plan or recommendation submitted by the planning commission shall take effect unless enacted or approved by not less than 5 members of council. So I just want to be aware that we're following the charter. All right, any other discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
McIntyre,
I want to be clear here. We're voting no upholds the denial. Correct?
Correct.
No.
Real,
Abstain.
Pioka,
Yes.
Feldman,
No.
Herman,
No.
Coffee,
No.
Baranek.
No.
That resolution does not pass. Next item on the agenda, ordinance 25-080. Will the clerk please read it by its title?
2025-080, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a telecommunications agreement and other related lease and assignment agreements with American Tower Corporation for the transfer and assignment of a telecommunications tower lease and declaring an emergency.
I move to suspend the rules.
Second.
Moved and seconded, suspend the rules. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? The rules are suspended.
I move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt. Any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
McIntyre,
Yes.
Real,
Yes.
Pioka,
Yes.
Feldman,
Yes.
Herman,
Yes.
Coffee,
Yes.
Baranek.
That ordinance passes and will take effect according to its terms. Item L, I'd like to introduce ordinance 25-081 and ask the clerk to please read it by its title.
2025-081, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a telecommunications agreement and other related lease and assignment agreements with Crown Castle for the transfer and assignment of telecommunications tower and declaring an emergency.
I move to suspend the rules.
Second.
Moved and seconded to suspend the rules. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? The rules are suspended.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adopt. Any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
McIntyre,
Yes.
Real,
Yes.
Pioka,
Yes.
Feldman,
Yes.
Herman,
Yes.
Coffee,
Yes.
Baranek.
That ordinance passes and will take effect according to its terms. Do we have a motion to pay the bills?
I move to
sorry.
authorize the president of council to sign the bill
I
listed for March
apologize.
13th, 2025.
Or is designate.
Or as designated.
Second.
Moved and seconded on the motion by Mr. McIntyre. Did you get it? This is my turn. All right. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? We will have the designee pay the bills, sign on the bills. Scheduling of standing committees, item 12. I think we just need a little more collaboration. As a presiding officer, I'll try to get with you guys when we see it. It's pretty tough to make the deadline and then get it under the committee chair, but be prepared to, have a meeting, right? Yeah. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed?